Iiccd 2025. Thank you. Allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Romi Sianturi, and I'm honored to once again be your host for this distinguished conference. Today, we will continue our collective effort to examine Indonesia's cultural wealth and its growing relevance in diplomacy as well as global affairs. Distinguished guests, as we enter the second day of our conference, it is worth recalling what we have accomplished yesterday. So we have concluded a rich set of panels and plenary discussions that pushed us to rethink how culture operates not simply as heritage, but as a strategic language of engagement which can reshape perceptions, build trust, and open diplomatic pathways that formal negotiations often cannot. I hope that you found yesterday's discussion fruitful and inspiring, as well as stimulating, and I trust that they have prepared you for the depth and diversity of perspectives that we will encounter once again today. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that we are good to resume our agenda for the afternoon. And now we will turn for the fourth plenary session, Innovations and the Impact of Cultural Diplomacy. So for this plenary session, ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have our speakers for today. First is Dr. Wasisto Raharjo Jati, researcher on media, political communication, and culture at Badan Riset dan Inovasi Nasional. We are also graced by Ibu Endra Triastuti, PhD, Associate Professor in Communication at Universitas Indonesia. Ibu Anindita Kusumalistia, SOS, MPP, Special Advisor for the Ministry of Culture, Republic of Indonesia. And lastly, Ms. Maki Katsuno Hayashikawa, Director of UNESCO Regional Office. For this very important plenary session, we will be moderated by the very distinguished Associate Professor of Communication at Universitas Indonesia, Dr. Indah Santi Pratidina. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome our moderator and speakers for the plenary session for Innovations and the Impacts of Cultural Diplomacy.
One, two, okay. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for being with us this lovely afternoon. Rain again, but I guess that will be a good sign because here in Indonesia we call it rain is a good sign of prosperity. So thank you for being here with us after lunch. Perhaps some of you will need some coffee, but I hope you still can enjoy the discussion and bring out the atmosphere for this very interesting topic of, see my notes here, sorry, innovations and impact of cultural diplomacy. We have here already our three distinguished guest speakers. Thank you so much for being here. I think no further introduction is needed, yeah, because it's already there. I heard there will be one speaker who's going to be online. Is he already ready to start?
Yes, Dr. Wasisto is going to be online and I believe he's ready.
Okay. Hello, selamat siang Pak Wasisto. Good. Oh, there you are. Thank you so much. Like we were just wondering where the display of the Zoom is. All right. So as I was noted by the committee for today, so the flow of the discussion will be for us hearing a bit of talk from you, Dr. Wasisto Raharjo Jati, and then we will continue to Maki Katsuno Hayashikawa-san or Maki-san. And then the third speaker will be Endah Triastuti, PhD, Batitut. And then last but not least, we will hear some talks from Anindita Kusuma Alicia, SOS, Sarjana Sosial MPP. I don't know what's the, maybe you can tell us, what is MPP, Mbak? Master of Public Policy. Okay, so that will be the flow of our discussion today. And so, without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Wasistora Harjo Jati to begin the speak. Go ahead, Mas. Oh, I'm sorry. I've been instructed to have a 15 minutes talk for each of the speakers, and permission to remind you perhaps in the middle of conversation if somehow it is prolonged than that. Thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry to disturb you.
So sometimes we got the stigma or maybe the prejudice about something that may be string with our culture. But social media can enable how we can alternatively change our mind and our insight about new culture especially. And there are 3 points I would like to elaborate. The first one is we can see that the digital platform in social media can able to be a process of forming and negotiating identity. So we can see that uh, the culture is not a static entity, but it can be a dynamic entity that can negotiate and preserve their culture identity. The second, we can also see that the social media can also to be a tools for preservation and promotion. So we can see that some folktales or maybe some fable can be digitized and shared by communities that previously only circulate in local communities. Now, due to the social media, they can be shared in social media strictly. And the third, digital platform can also challenge the conventional belief. Also, so as I mentioned earlier, that sometimes we got the stigma, we got the prejudice, but due to social media, we can change our mind, or maybe just uh, seeing the stories or maybe seeing the posting, so we can fight the stereotypes and so the culture in better light. So as you can see the screen, you can see that in the current viral song Bola Bali, maybe most of you already know this. We can see that how the taste of Indonesian music from Western part can mingle or maybe can get along with the taste of Indonesian music from the east side. So we can see that uh, the culture narrative that previously just strictly divided by geographical area. Now, because we can share our vision, our our taste, so we can also mix these differences to be a good product, as you can see on the song of Kabula Ballet that that's still virally on social media. So we can see that social media it can be an enabler for maybe some different culture can mingle each other in one aspect, maybe songs or maybe ceremonies and etc. So that's the first argument that I want to share with you all. And how about the reverse side? So in first presentation, I shared with you all that the cultural narrative in social media can bring positive impact. However, in different aspect, we can see that the cultural narrative can bring in the maybe still stigma or maybe negative opinion about something. So as you can see on the screen, this is the part of the viral horror film. Maybe many of you already know this, Kakak Desa Penari. So we can see that the cultural narrative on social media can can still influence public opinion and shaping identities. So there are 3 points here. How we can see cultural narrative influence in social media. For example, influencing public discussion and then making content go viral and also changing cultural standard. However, it depends on the role of influencer to shape the cultural narrative. Sometimes some popular products such as music or film, as you can see on the screen, still maintain the negative stigma or maybe the prejudice that still inherited in the popular culture. So that's why in this regard, social media can able to be bring a positive, but sometimes due to the market factor, they can be pragmatically as maintain the pragmatic sentiment, such as how we can see that in the KKN disciplinary, some Japanese uh, culture, such as offering or sesajen, or maybe some things that relate with animism or dynamism, still have underestimate view in this regard. So that's why this is the ambivalent of uh, how we can see that cultural narrative can be positive and negative, especially in popular culture such as film and music. And how about how about the cultural communities? So we can see that uh, in this sense, cultural communities have different opinion uh, rather than the two presentation that I share with you today. So we can see that cultural communities can be a solidarity, mobilization, visibility, and problems. So we can see that communities they have own standard, they have own view, regardless of using social media. Say they can able to have their opinion, especially how an influencer can able to within the classic culture to be a viral content. So as you can see on the screen, we can see that how Gara Saraswati, many of you maybe already know this. So she can able to bring the voice of communities to be a good good viral content on her social media. So she always show up with the traditional outfit that represent some communities tribe, for example, Japanese or maybe Minang or maybe Dayak or maybe Balinese. So it it can be a bridge to represent how communities culture can be represented in one figure. So that's why in this senses, we can see that cultural communities narrative have strong tone rather than cultural narrative that reproduce in popular culture, especially in social media. Uh, Maybe that's all today for my presentation. Sorry for the brief introduction, but I'm looking forward to receive comment and feedback for my presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you, moderator.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Wasisto. That was a very interesting talk, yeah. Uh, and it was I find it very interesting that you try to uh, again put on the idea of how digital platforms has the power and ability to, you were saying, forming, negotiating, preserve, and also challenge the already existing narrative. So I found that quite interesting. Actually, I was kind of still wondering what is the actual cultural narratives that you're actually talking about, but let's put that to the next question and answer. So, so I would like to invite the second speaker, Ms. Maki Katsunahaya Hashikawa-san, Maki-san, to give your speak. Go ahead, you have 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Dina. So I do have a PowerPoint, so hopefully the technical team can help me there. I will not be using a clicker because I'm very bad with it, so I just ask next. But first of all, thank you very much for inviting UNESCO and myself to this panel session today. It's a great honor to be part of this very distinguished panelists, and also to be able to share some of the work we do in UNESCO, especially around cultural diplomacy. I hope I'm actually responding to the core questions and the theme of the session, but if I divert a little bit, please help me later on. We can actually clarify Q&A. Do I see the slide? No, I don't see the slide yet. It's coming. Well, I could start by saying that cultural diplomacy itself, the theme of this whole conference, lies at the very core of UNESCO's mandate. I think our work in UNESCO, of course, culture is probably the most famous work that we do, although we do also other work in education and natural science and so on, but probably culture is the most famous. But it's not because we have the heritage sites like Borobudur or we have the natural biosphere reserves and so on. It's not because of only that, because culture is really the core in terms of actions that we take throughout our program that we have. And for that, I actually wanted to have the very first slide to come out because I would like to show the first slide with a very important message. You could go to the next because that's only the cover slide. I don't know how many of you actually knows that UNESCO has its own constitution. It's one of the only UN agency beside the UN as a whole that has its own constitution that was adopted actually 80 years ago. We are actually becoming 80 years old as well, like the entire UN. And UNESCO, in its constitution, in this preamble, we start by this saying, this statement. Since wars begin in the minds of women and men, it's been updated because of the gender consideration, women and men, it is in the minds of women and men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. And it continues to say that a peace based exclusively upon the political and economic arrangements of governments would not be a peace which could secure the unanimous, lasting, and sincere support of the peoples of the world. So this vision really remains relevant today. Even this was actually adopted in 1945. I think this statement is even more relevant probably today than ever it has been. Next. So culture, whether it's tangible or intangible or creative dimensions, it should not be considered to be a luxury or accessory up to development, right? It is really culture. We consider that culture as a foundation for peace. It is a means to foster mutual understanding and cooperation among nations and peoples across borders. And this vision permeates in all UNESCO's work, not only in culture, but also in education, sciences, communications, and also it's reflected in the 6 international cultural conventions that we have. And building on this foundation, it's also important to recognize that culture cannot be confined within national borders. And this is where I think cultural diplomacy differs from political diplomacy, where it's extremely well defined by the national borders. And also, it's also because there's no national boundary for culture that it also makes it more difficult sometimes and complicated, but also more interesting and meaningful for human civilization. And so I would say that culture actually flows, and you can move on to the next slide, please. That culture flows, people move, for centuries, history, within history, people have been moving. And with the people movement, ideas circulate, traditions evolve, and arts, they cross boundaries with ease. And you can see this is the interesting map that we have found. It's not UNESCO's map, but it's also interesting. This is actually Upper Paleolithic era, so like 40,000 years ago. You see all the human beings starting to move. But if you go to the next slide, please. It's a bit more recent, although it's 1900 BC. You can see that maritime trade has been even more actively expanded across the world. And with this movement of people, maybe they had other motives. It could be trade or immigration, migration to another country, or even for other regions. But you can see once people move, the culture, the tradition also moved along with them, and see that there is no border in this at all. So next, please. When we think about cultural diplomacy and also managing our national cultural assets, whether it's a heritage site or creative industry, next slide, please, and whether it's museum collection, traditional knowledge, it means that when we talk about cultural diplomacy, it requires, as a I would say prerequisite, it requires a transporter cooperation. And it's an operational necessity, not just a philosophical ideal. Next, please. So here you can see that some of the few examples why transboundary cooperation becomes an operational necessity. For example, if you're talking about protecting cultural property in conflict zones, this demands mutual respect for each other's heritage, and it's not just about the legal obligation under the 1954 Hague Convention, but it's a test of humanity and trust across borders. There's no, there's no fault in the cultural heritage, leading to, well, it has actually often led to war, but I think there's, this is something that we have to make sure that it doesn't become part of the conflict. Combating illicit trafficking of cultural objects, this is a big issue in this region particularly, but it cannot done by one country alone. So it requires coordination between countries, from the original country and those countries where the active markets are found. You talk about underwater cultural heritage, like shipwrecks, and you can find a lot of shipwrecks in the Southeast Asian oceans. But this, of course, belongs to multiple histories and stories, of the people who have been around on the oceans, and it requires dialogue across jurisdictions. So you cannot really talking about the maritime jurisdictions here at all. Creative industry, today, I think it's not just about the collaboration among artists, but the digital technology is also coming into this deal. And sometimes the digital technologies not only erases traditional borders, but it's also impacting on the copyright issues and infringements, of the right of artists, or even fair remuneration, and it really requires international partnerships around this. And another point is performing arts and contemporary designs, that mobility and exchange of people are really essential criteria for creativity. Yeah. Now, next, please, thank you. So if we, with this kind of understanding, it really naturally leads us to the next point. How do we actually manage cultural diplomacy effectively? And to do that, we really must shift, our understanding of culture from competition to cooperation. And in recent decades, of course, competition has also defined a lot of our cultural work. Countries will, engage in cultural areas. They have tried to claim ownership over certain cultural tradition, art, create creative arts, and just saying that, oh, this tradition is more authentic than the other, this is more outstanding than others. And of course, they want to, many countries, member states of UNESCO want to be inscribed, they want to inscribe their cultural heritage on the list. No, we can understand the national pride associated with this. It's important, but I guess what we are also trying to promote is that purely nationalistic approach can actually undermine the very spirit of UNESCO's cultural conventions, because each of these conventions that we work for, the 1954 Hague Convention to the 2003 Convention on Intangible Cultural Heritage, or even the 2005 Convention on the Diversity of Cultural Expressions, and you do not need to remember all the convention years, but just to demonstrate there's many conventions that relates to cultural heritage and cultural management. The one underlying purpose of all these conventions is that it is meant to build peace by nurturing mutual respect and dialogue among cultures. And so these conventions, the spirit there is not about competition, it's about cooperation. And so we want to really, through cultural diplomacy, we want to really kind of shift from the ownership to stewardship, from national claims to shared responsibilities. Next, please. So within UNESCO, we have several mechanisms for promoting multilateral cooperation in culture. And of course, these are the two big instruments that we have. The 2003 Intangible Cultural Heritage Convention, where countries can submit multinational nominations to representative of urgent safeguarding list. Or you have the 1972 World Heritage Convention, where states may propose transboundary or serial nominations to recognize cultural continuities across borders. I just highlighted these two because these two are most relevant when it comes to the discussion around cross-border cooperation in cultural heritage management. And next, please. Just a quick example here I can show from other regions beyond Asia Pacific. Like the Great Spa Towns of Europe, this was inscribed jointly by 7 countries, tell the story, share a story that no single town can tell alone. Next slide, please. Here we have the architectural work of Le Corbusier, spanning 7 countries again, celebrates a common modernist vision of architecture. Next slide, please. Then you have the Steci medieval tombstone graveyards, and jointly nominated by 4 Balkan states. They turned the local sites into a powerful regional narrative of medieval interaction. So each of these examples really demonstrates the collective presentation strengthens rather than weakens individual heritage values. So although of course each national local culture has its own values to the people living there and passing on the tradition, but collectively they even strengthen that together. Next slide. Thank you. So let's look at Southeast Asia, which is most familiar to all of us here. Unfortunately, there's really no examples of such multinational heritage site nominations today yet. And I think we need to have more collaboration and efforts around this. However, there are trends of multinational nomination for intangible cultural heritage. And this is becoming very actively engaged. And Indonesia is one of the leading countries in trying to engage in this. One of the most recent inscription is the Kabaya. Yeah, under the theme of knowledge, skills, and traditional practices. This was a joint nomination by 5 countries, Brunei Darussalam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand. And it marks one of the largest multinational Iiccd, Intangible Cultural Heritage nomination led by Southeast Asia today. Of course, we have smaller ones like between the Pantun between Indonesia and Malaysia. We have another one. Indonesia has been also working with African countries to put a joint nomination for the Kolintan. And so there are also cross-regional as well. But I think within Southeast Asia together, there are still very few. I think there could be more work being done because it really represents the collective vision for cultural appreciation and value. But of course, in order to make true difference, it's not just inscribing this joint nomination. The most important part is what happens afterwards, after you inscribe your heritage, because I think there's also a need for better coordinating, safeguarding the plans, sharing the monitoring practices, to have joint activities to further enhance the joint nomination among the participating states, and also sustain the collaboration with the local communities that are most directly affected by the cultural heritage nominations. So we want to also encourage that there's inscribing multinational nomination is not the end of the story, it's only the beginning. And after that, we hope that further collaboration will continue and even further strengthened. Next, please. Just a few more. So what is really needed is better collaboration and also maybe to create a cultural networks within the region. I think this will be very important to demonstrate how this region shares the maritime roots, the trading network, belief systems, and artistic traditions. This is just one example where the maritime spice route is being also promoted across different countries, going beyond Southeast Asia. And I think the result will be like a web of intertwined cultural practices, whether it's agriculture, crafts, or music, or festivals, and this cannot be divided by national borders. I think shared heritage transporter traditions is not an academic theory anymore. It's really about testimony, living testimonies to centuries of interactions we have been having over this, our countries or our region. Now, next slide, please. So this actually points to the need for a broader regional ecosystem of cultural management, where success will depend on collective frameworks for conservation, creativity, education, tourism, and the like. And of course, beyond UNESCO mechanism, there are certain cultural networks and collective branding, which have already been proved to be very effective worldwide. Next slide, please. And this was coming from Europe, the most beautiful village of France, or even a bit closer to home right now is the Mekong Moment, which was an initiative to promote the Lucan-Mekong region as a unified cultural and tourism destination through digital storytelling. And so all of these, or both of these initiatives, show that culture thrives through connections, networking multiple villages and communities. It can raise visibility of these communities. It will reduce costs. It can build trust. It can help communities to build themselves their own narratives as part of a bigger regional collaboration. Next slide, please. A little bit of insight from the Mondial Code 2025. The Mondial Code is the World Conference on Culture and Development. It takes place every 3 years, and this year, we had the third session, I think, of Mondial Code. Yeah, in Barcelona, Spain. Thank you very much. And the reason I want to say that because this conference really sets a global direction for our culture work in UNESCO, but also for all our member states. And what is important to note here is that this conference reaffirmed that culture is a global public good, and it is a pillar of human rights and sustainable development. And of course, one of our ambitious goals here is to make culture as one of the standalone goals in the post-2030 UN agenda. Well, let's keep our fingers crossed whether this will happen. But also important to note that there were 6 priority themes identified: cultural rights, digital technology, culture education, economy and culture, culture, climate action, and so on. With the 2 cross-cutting themes, particularly artificial intelligence will be a really important theme in the coming years. But also, Mondial further underscored the need for stronger multilateralism, inclusive dialogue, and shared data systems across borders. And these will be really a strong basis for effective cultural diplomacy. So, next slide, please. So just to conclude, I think what I wanted to kind of end by saying is that for all of us who are working in the field of cultural diplomacy, there's very clear messages here. Yeah? First of all, culture is not only about expression of identity, it is a vehicle for dialogue and peace building. Borders make no sense in cultural dialogues because culture cuts across borders. So we need trans-border cooperation to allow countries to build soft power collectively, increase visibility through joint platforms and co-branding, share resource expertise, and also foster trust and dialogue, even when politically sensitive, in a politically sensitive context. So in this sense, I think culture becomes a bridge of diplomacy, not a battleground for prestige. And I think this is where we want to continue collaborating with all our partners as well. So I think I had one more slide. Apologies, I know my time is up. But I just wanted to mention that there's a lot of potential for Southeast Asia now. And I think one important point is that ASEAN has already recognized culture as a pillar of community building. So here, I hope that cultural diplomacy within ASEAN will be really promoted. Indonesia, in particular, has a very good potential for leading this, and especially because Southeast Asia has a shared history, cultural proximity, and a strong spirit of regional kinship. So with that, I wish to stop here. Thank you very much, and I look forward to a lot of exchanges.
Round of applause, please, for Maki-san. Thank you so much for that very interesting share of what the efforts has been done by UNESCO. So unfortunately, Maki-san need to leave, but we don't want her to leave without giving the audience who have some opportunity to ask her a question. So if there's any, oh great, okay, we're going to take only, because the limit of time, we are going to only take one or two. So I see the lady with the hijab over there, the white hijab, number one. Do we have another one before Maki-san's leaving? All good? Okay, go ahead and ask your question. Please state your name first and your institution. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity first. My name is Akwisha Irin Maulana. I'm from Al-Azhar 8th Islamic Senior High School. And
high school?
Yeah, I'm still in high school. And I would really like to ask you a question. Since we can enhance culture diplomacy by using social media and media that has been elaborated firstly, and there are two things. We can use media to enhance soft power and nation branding, but also by using media, we can, there's like a negative part to it. For example, looting with cultural heritages. So I want to ask regarding for UNESCO, as technologies begin to grow rapidly, the rates towards black market digitally has been increasing also. And are there regulations or solutions and action that has been implemented by UNESCO? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. That's a very important, timely, but difficult question. And I think it could have been also answered by our previous speaker as well to some extent. Right now, I think UNESCO is in the process of developing guidelines on how to combat, the online even scams and, platforms that actually have harms to the cultural heritage management and also promotion. Right now, it's more generally dealt with on the broader, governance of digital platforms and also social media regulations. Culture, in the field of culture, what we are more focusing on is how to protect artists' rights on the digital space. I think very recently in Indonesia, there was this whole issue about mimicking the anime on the social media. Of course, one way is it could be appreciation of that art of the artists, because people would like to copy and learn from all these, famous artists or cartoonists or animated, directors. But at the same time, it's an infringement of the right of their expression and freedom of expression, as well as their copyright issues. And it was a bit of an issue within also UNESCO, yeah. And also in the film industry, there's a lot of AI-generated image of actors, actresses, as well as voice over recording. And these are really infringing on the right of artists and creative artists and performers. So this is where we are trying to set some guidelines and also working with governments, training also social media platform organizers and providers how to make sure that, not regulation, but how to moderate content and what kind of systems are being used, and making sure that such violation does not happen on a regular basis. However, it is very difficult to control this. Everything that happens on the digital platform is often very hidden, very deep down. Another area that is very challenging for us is illicit trafficking of art, art crafts, antiquities, because the dealing also happen often online these days. And we do not know where that original market is happening and being sold, marketed from who to whom or where to where, and it's a big challenge. But it also goes beyond UNESCO's mandate, because this also is within the areas of trafficking and crime. So, but it is an issue that has been always raised, and we are looking into it. So when there's a new guidance coming out of it, we'll be very happy to share with the wider community. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? Okay. This is very, how to say, heartwarming. A high schooler asking about cultural heritage. And so it is, I think it's good to conclude that so it is being acknowledged, all of these challenges with the technology development and so on and so forth, but we are still a very long way to go to try to find the ideal solution, perhaps.
Just to say that I think it's not only negative, because there can also be very positive dimension of technology being used. For example, there are cultural sites in a conflict area where you cannot really visit. Now you can use technology to be able to visit that in a AR, artificial realm, and digital technology can help us to see some of the cultural heritage that you will not be able to access in the past. So there are also positive dimensions, so we have to balance how to make good use of those technologies available to us.
Both sides of the coins, everything, yes. Okay, thank you so much. Is there any other last question from Maki-san? Okay, go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Fikri from UI. I want to ask about the point number 2 about illicit trafficking. Indonesia still hasn't ratified the 21 UNESCO Convention on Underwater Cultural Heritage, which make the fight against illicit trafficking harder. So the convention is depend on state joining, but many key maritime countries in ASEAN doesn't ratify the convention. So what I want to ask is, given that Indonesia hasn't ratified the UNESCO Convention on Underwater Cultural Heritage, I want to ask what practical limitation that this create for preventing the trafficking, and how effective can UNESCO actually be a key maritime state that doesn't join the ratify? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, actually, the convention, this is trafficking. This is the worst convention when it comes to ratification. It's the least ratified convention among all the 6 conventions that we have. And none of the Southeast Asian countries have ratified this. And there's really good reasons, because it's also very political, and even underwater antiquities, actually heritage can also involve the military. So it can be a very sensitive area, and we understand why countries are hesitant to ratify. It doesn't mean that we do not do any work around it. First of all, UNESCO has been working with the countries in Southeast Asia. Our office actually covers 5 countries. So we cover Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei Darussalam, Philippines, and Timor-Leste. With these 5 countries, we have been working to train cultural management officers together and to identify how to address this issue without being too political. And also, for example, you could have, what do you call this, I'm sorry, I'm not a specialist here, but how to detect where the shipwrecks are and where it lies and where it comes from and who to contact and how, and also certain guidelines that we have that, we train the experts in it. So we do try to continue to work with practitioners, if not, with the legal side or the political side, yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Unfortunately, because of the limited of time, we need to move on to our next speaker. Thank you so much for the questions from the audience, and thank you so much for Maki-san for giving the time to be here. Can we please give a round of applause for Maki-san? Thank you so much. Okay, let's move on to the next speaker. I'm sorry for you guys to need to wait. Oh, Maki-san, are you leaving soon? Oh, okay. Right. So our next speaker is Endah Triastuti, PhD, or I like to call her Mbak Titut because we're from the same department. The time is yours. Go ahead, Mbak Titut.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. In this presentation, I'll pick up the 2024 HIP DUT track. Garam dan Madu. It was sang by Indonesian artists Tansi, Naikila, and Jemzi as a central case study. The song exemplifies a grassroots, digitally driven cultural movement in Indonesia music scene, blending traditional dangdut, a unique Indonesian genre, with modern hip hop and a background of electronic elements. The song was released in December 2024, and went viral quickly. Okay, I would like to highlight two important points from this song. The first is the authenticity of DIY, and the second is the an outlook of private / local space that turns into public / global space. For whoever listened to this music, we know that this song is a typical low-budget production. It is shown from everyday cluttered background. The artist transformed local and private space into global, international stages. It reflects not just the authenticity of the artist, but also it is relatable vibe that feels genuine and unpolished, making it highly shareable on platforms like TikTok and Instagram Reels. The tune is very light and simple and humble that everyone, even outside Indonesian culture, can sing along, dance with the song, and also recreate the music or the song. Both points, both the authenticity of DIY and the shift from private / local space to public / global stage, lead us, at least me, to recognize a major production mode of the younger generation. We love to call them Gen Z, but despite their subversive attitude that we may sometimes complain, the production of rebellion and also subversive, yet very creative in every way. Including the way how the Gen Z exploit the digital platforms in their production mode. Talking about Gen Z and how they navigate mobile platforms by optimizing them to carry everyday life stories and invite forms of borderless participation, we won't miss the fact that there are fans from Jakarta, Kuala Lumpur, Tokyo, and South Korea that upload dances with this sound as a background, also upload covers from the songs and remixes. And those practices basically forming a borderless TikTok public. I will try to, so if you see this song, should be the song on it, but I cannot hear the sound. But it is in top songs in Malaysia. It is top 40 in Malaysia and top 70 in Singapore. So it is quite globalized. These global practices create a shared cultural space where users co-produce hybrid sonic identities. Sonic identities is an identities rooted in song, voice, and movement that neither belong solely to Indonesians nor global pop, but to a shared algorithmic space. It fosters a new global culture public, and this digital environment encourages continued creativity and interaction, making cultural exchange more dynamic and accessible. So to me, within this context, the case of garam and madu indicate the emerging informal cultural diplomacy. In the two next slides, I will compare Indonesian context, garam dan madu with K-pop in South Korea and manga from Japan. The song Organic Success in Malaysia exemplifies informal cultural diplomacy. From this song that now Malaysian people start to worry that the youngest generation in Malaysia start to speak Indonesian better than speak Malaysia, for example. And without formal state involvement, without bureaucracy, the track promotes Indonesia heritage through algorithmic recommendation and shared musical roots, fostering positive neighborly sentiment. Having said that, I would like to emphasize that algorithmic recommendation play a crucial role in the song's regional success. Not just it creates authenticity, but also it connects people to people, culture to cultures. And from the cultural diplomacy and soft culture point of view, it fosters mutual understanding and more through informal diplomacy that invite people to participate voluntarily, making cultural exchange more organic and effective than traditional state-sponsored campaign. So here, looking back and comparing other countries, well, I would like to highlight the important roles of Gen Z or younger generation in their role to enhance informal cultural diplomacy. So the role is very significant. We can look at the South Korea. This is the BTS. Now they have like a micro cancel, but still I will provide them as the example. And Japan. Two countries that weaponize music, soap opera, and manga to foster their soft power. So then maybe we can reframe the definition of cultural diplomacy from the formal point of view to the more informal point of view. But then maybe Indonesia can do quite the same by taking into account humble everyday live performances on platforms as a new ideological apparatus. As in the case of the song and many others, the authenticity of DIY potentially can be the national state's capitals. Moreover, by optimizing mobile platforms, we can see how streaming and user uploads eliminate the needs for physical productions. I'm talking about economic-wise, financial-wise, time-wise, space-wise, where user uploads aligning heritage promotion with sustainability goals. Artifact of cultural diplomacy may circulate endlessly in digital package, reducing environmental impact while preserving cultural legacy without the need for expensive physical production and distribution. So basically, I'm trying to say that digital circulation of cultural heritage that leads to cultural diplomacy significantly reduce costs. As well, this model proves that cultural heritage can be both sustainable and impactful in the modern digital world. To wrap up this presentation, I would like to suggest that the government support digital infrastructure and establish a system of recognition for those young informal ambassadors. I would like to call them ambassadors by adopting an equitability revenue model that puts the original right holders at the center. because as we know nowadays, the content like the madu and garam dan madu, mobile to across digital platforms without being recognized the copyrights. So both government and industry can ensure that cultural heritage remains vibrant and sustainable in the digital age, thereby fostering a sustainable cultural ecosystem. I would like to close this presentation with the last slide that I hope the team in the back can provide sound for the slide. Thank you.
Thank you. Round of applause, please. That was quite a good beat for our this afternoon. Thank you so much, Mbak Titut. I guess, again, this gives us more discussion of how informal channels of cultural diplomacy, especially in authenticity, in cultural creativity, and so on. So we have listened in to two academic researcher scholars and then one practitioner of a cultural policy. I'm very interested how Mbak Anindita will put her place because I heard she's also alumni of international relations here in UI, right? But you are now the special advisor for Ministry of Culture. We are very excited to hear your talk. Last but not least, go ahead, Mbak Anindita.
Thank you, Mbak.
Sorry,
Terima kasih.
Anindita, not Anandita.
Thank you, Mbak. Good afternoon, everyone. Huge honor to be here this afternoon as an alumni of this faculty, the IR department actually. So truly an honor to return today to once again see this familiar faces, the professors, lecturers, colleagues, and glad that we can bring together this dialogue which combine all together the culture, economy, and also diplomacy in this discussion this afternoon. And I've been asked to also speak from the vantage point of the government, specifically from the Ministry of Culture of the Republic of Indonesia. This is, we just turned 1 year old, actually last month. So this is actually the first time that we have a standalone Ministry of Culture. Previously, it was always merged with the Ministry of Education or Ministry of Tourism. And here I would like to talk about how the cultural and creative industries can serve as an engine of growth and also as strategic vehicles for the cultural diplomacy. Okay, let me start with the normative layer as sort of a foundation of why we put cultural economy as one of the flagships or the priority policies in our ministry. So as been mentioned as well by Ibu Maki previously, that in 2022 actually the countries including Indonesia, we declared that culture is a global public good and also culture should be a standalone goal beyond 2030. And also this commitment also reaffirmed last month in the third session of the Mondial Cult in Barcelona. And then what does it mean that public is culture is a public good? It means that culture is something that all people are entitled to, right? So they can access culture, they can participate in it, and also they can benefit from it. Also, in some cases, they also can help govern it, how the culture is defined and, I mean, the policy of the culture itself. And culture also enables and drives sustainable development, hence countries promote it to be a standalone goal post-2030 besides the economy and environment and also the people pillars. However, for a very long time, public policy treated culture mainly as a cost center in the state budget. It wasn't seen as a driver of growth and resilience. Today, the evidence actually tells a different story. As we can see here in the global number here, the CCI, or cultural and creative industry, actually contribute around 4.3 trillion US dollar, or 6% of the world economy. So it's a very huge potential. And it also shows that culture is actually already an economic power. So we say that it's in Indonesia, and in our policy framework, we call it kebudayaan sebagai ekonomi baru, or culture as a new economy, economic power, kekuatan ekonomi baru. But this shows that culture is actually already a huge economic power. And on the bottom here, actually, it's actually a triangle of culture, economy, and diplomacy. And the CCI, cultural and creative industry, actually sits in between all these three frameworks. So just a brief definition of the CCIs, because the working language and also the core definition is actually interchangeable with cultural economy. So David Rosby here in his book in Culture and Economy in 2001, he actually defined and differentiate between economic value and cultural value. And also Ian Moore in his book in 2014, he also defined the cultural industries as a creation, production, and commercialization of similar content across publishing, audiovisual, blah, blah, blah. But it's also interesting that because Moore also find that one of the very few countries that actually put cultural industries in their national policy, the first one is actually the UK in 1994, so it's not very old. I mean, it's very recent, in 1994. They put it formally in their national policy, and followed by Australia in 1997. And then here, actually, some scholars like De Bokoler and Spence, they actually provide an interesting view regarding the CCI, especially the creative industry, because they have a critic regarding this term, because they call it a celebratory term, the creative industry. So they prefer the term cultural economy because this means that it is the full system of producing, distributing, and consuming cultural goods and services, together with the cultural, economic, and social political context in which this happens. So this is sort of more holistic, and it includes both monetary and non-monetary transactions. And in this talk, I will keep using the term CCI, because that's what the declaration says, what the UNESCO says, and also it's the working language in the international level. But conceptually, our policy in Indonesia is closer to the cultural economy perspective. Okay, yeah. And there are actually 4 policy lenses to see the cultural industry, the CCIs, in the international regime. The first one from the UNESCO. As you can see, this is actually a very culture-based perspective. And the second one from UNCTAD, of course, because UNCTAD trade and development. Some people actually, they have a critique against it because it's too commercial and it reduces culture to only exports and trade. And from WIPO is the World IP organization, World Intellectual Property Organization. And the critics is also, the term it's also be too legalistic. And from the UNESCO point of view, the OECD point of view, I mean, oh sorry, this one is wrong. This digital and innovation model is actually in OECD. It also often tends to fit only developed countries rather than a broader view of emerging countries and developing countries. So our response, Indonesia's response to these terms, is we have this approach called integrated cultural innovation value chain, because for us, the challenge is not to choose one lens, but to synchronize them in a way that works for our context and for the global south more broadly. And this one actually has been mentioned by the minister on the opening session yesterday. This is the cultural capital actually of Indonesia, because we have mega diversity, and also we are one of the oldest civilizations on earth, actually based on the several findings of paleoanthropological yeah, this is actually the capital for our CCI. And then we also have the constitutional mandate here in UUD 1945, Article 32, I'm sorry, paragraph 1. So when we talk about CCIs, we are actually talking about an economy that is built on top of this mega diversity and a deep time heritage. So here are some numbers on some of our cultural ecosystems. Oh, sorry, this one is the main cultural ecosystems that we have now. This is the only examples. For example, this is the screen and audiovisual. This includes also films, television and video, music and performing arts, including dances, theater, and also design, wastra, digital content, and Iiccd. Iiccd is animation, comic, and games, literatures, museum and heritage sites. We actually have a separate body now called Iiccd. Not separate, but it's still under the ministry, but it's a more independent one. It's called Indonesian Heritage Agency to manage the museum and heritage sites, and also the gastronomy. So these are the numbers. We see a lot of potential actually in our cultural ecosystems. In the screen industry, we are projected to contribute up to 9.8 billion to the GDP by 2027. And also the trajectory is that the jobs will grow 40% annually, and more than 91 million cinema audiences was recorded in November 2025. Actually, last year was actually larger. The number is around 122 million people. And what's interesting is that the local films actually commanding 70% of the box office. So most of the movie audience in cinema, mostly they watch local film or nationally produced films. But we have the challenge here, which is the shortage of cinema screen, because currently we still need around 7,000 screens, cinema screens in Indonesia to balance our huge population. So this is quite a challenge for us because so now the problem is not the lack of the movie production, but it's the waiting line for the movies to can be screened in the cinema. And then here the wastra as well, batik, tenun, and also the museum and heritage sites, and also digital content. This is actually the huge potential as well, because Indonesia is the largest creator ecosystem here in Southeast Asia. We have around 12 million creators, which produce 1 million contents every month. And also at the bottom here, it's actually the projection of the digital economy in Indonesia in 2026. Also, these are the other numbers. The first one here, the 4,368. This is the number of 3D scans of the Prambanan Temple Complex and Wayang and Keris. This is one of our development of digital cultural innovations. So we do 3D scannings for our cultural heritage, both the cultural sites like the temples and also other cultural heritage like Wayang and Keris. So that's one of the way to preserve and also digitalize our cultural assets. And also we have a lot of cultural ecosystem advancement programs which already reach a lot of people and also cultural actors. Here are the number of people who are involved within the 2025. And also we have these talent pipelines called National Talent Management, because this is a very important one if we talk about the CCI or the cultural economy, that we have to provide some sort of capacity building, training to nurture the talents so that they can contribute to the industry itself. So, of course, we don't want a model that is very linear, right? Like a model that is heritage in and money out, because now we think in terms of a circular cultural economy. This is inspired in part by a model developed by our colleague, Dr. Joseph Lo, who presented this last week in Kupang in our event called Indonesia and Pacific Cultural Synergy. Dr. Joseph Lo, he worked for the Smithsonian and he developed this circular economy. So what is the objective here? So we want to generate the cultural capital, right? So the first cultural capital here, we can see it's the first generation of master of artisan. So they are the tradition bearer, for example. And then here, the policy intervention comes in through the cultural drivers and infrastructure. So we give capacity building. We also have associations, training through associations and communities. And also we give some grants to the cultural practitioners. And also here's the industry, the industrial level, where the cultural products is produced and distributed. And here is also the important part, which is the recapitalization or investment. Here we do a lot of competitions, festivals, residencies, recognitions to find a wider talent pool. And then finally we can sort of produce the second generation of master artisan. This is actually the objective of the cultural economy. So it should be a circular economy. So to make this real, we are building a policy architecture that follows this chain. So we have the upstream, midstream, and also the downstream, because the objective of the cultural economy itself is to downstreaming the culture or hilirisasi kebudayaan. So at the upstream level, at the level of cultural capital and talent, we have the constitutional and legal foundation once again, and our constitution explicitly mandate the state to advance culture and safeguard cultural rights. And on top of this, we have created a cultural endowment fund called Dana Indonesiana, and now the capital or the fund itself amounted up to 323 million US dollar endowment fund, and this year we already disbursed 30 million US dollar. And there are at least 3,000 beneficiaries in the first batch, and we supported community initiatives, cultural productions, media, and also heritage. And also, as I said before, we also have the talent pipeline, including the National Talent Management Program. We also have competition, master classes, film labs, music labs, markets. We also have some programs and movement called Study with Maestro, in which the maestro of each arts, they have special workshops for cultural enthusiasts and also cultural practitioners, young cultural practitioners. We also have Seniman Masuk Sekolah, so the artists who works with the schools. So yeah, those are the talent pipelines projects that is being helped by the ministry. And then the second one is midstream, which is the industry and markets. We also support the film market and exhibition, for example. And then this is the downstream and recapitalization. We have cross-border cooperation as well. Sorry, the time is up, I know.
Sorry,
so I just need to underline this cross-border cooperation in this, because we have to link it with the cultural diplomacy, right? So we have a lot of co-productions and partnerships with a lot of friendly countries, including with the Netherlands, France, South Korea, UAE, India, and Turkey. And this cooperation include funding, exchange, and residencies, talent development, and those are reciprocal. So we can do residencies here in Indonesia or in the partner country. And also we have co-production arrangements with several institutions as well, and also public-private partnership that we have started with our agency, Iiccd. And once again, I just want to have the level of analysis in terms of our CCI and cultural diplomacy. So yeah, in the level of individual actor, all the cultural actors, as been said before, they are cultural ambassadors as well. And in the transnational network, we also create platforms and co-creation spaces. And also in the institutional frameworks, we have co-production agreements and MOUs and that I already mentioned. But the conditions for all of this is that the creators have to be empowered and protected, number one. And the second one, the works have to be circulated transnationally. They have to be able to move transnationally. And the third one is that the institutional bridges have to turn circulation into the long-term relationship. Okay, so this is just the digital AI and protection of culture.
Yes.
I just want to put...
Yes, this will be probably open for discussion later on. So sorry,
No
because we
worries
only
at all.
have a limited of time.
Okay.
I'm sure there's going to be a lot of question, well, a lot, or maybe one or two question about digital and AI. So thank you so much, Mbak Aninita. Please a round of applause for her. So So just to give a bit of a glimpse, a summary, a very simple one at that, that we have talked from 2 scholars, 2 academicians, and also 2 practitioners in cultural diplomacy. So we have that, I think we all can agree that the term of the sentence that say that culture as a global public goods. And I think 4 of the speakers has talked how there are proofs of consensus both from the formal entities, the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Culture, and UNESCO as well, and then so adapters of informal digital channels, i.e. social media. We have also talked a bit about the definition of cultural and creative industry. That is, I think we can all agree that is very dynamic and forever adapting to the changes in cultural ecosystem, not just in Indonesia, but internationally, which I think somehow translate to institutional and grassroots efforts of sustainability, hopefully, and which this also includes policy, extensive cooperation, and so on, ya Mbak, just like what Mbak Anindita has discussed for us. Okay. Now, very good. I'm in time. So we still have 15 minutes for question and answer. Kindly raise your hand, perhaps, and then please let us know whether you're addressing the question to a certain speaker or to all of our speakers. Pak Wasito, are you still here with us? Oh, he's not here. Okay, so only for the 2 speakers then. Thank you. Okay, questions? It is open in session. Yes, okay. So the lady with the black hijab. Any other? Okay, the sir with the batik on the center. So let's have one more perhaps. All good? Okay. So go ahead, ask your question, and then you will be the second, sir.
Okay, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon. For everyone, thank you for the speakers and the moderator as well. I just want to address my question maybe to Mbak Mbak Bu Enda.
Boleh ya Mbak Titut ya Mbak.
Sorry. It's about how the music, the viral of the music. Actually, the camera is overwhelming. The viral of the musics led to the promotions of our culture maybe. Looking from Hallyu or Korean wave, it's actually they started very organic. I see it as it started very organic. It's using internet and globalization, and they become viral. And nowadays, TikTok and short form of music also like used in your presentation, the TikTok videos. I think it's become an opportunity for us as well to promote our music. So I just want to know your further opinion about the viral strategy of music in the for our cultural diplomacy, and as well as the negativity that might be impacted from it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we compile or just right away answer directly? Up to me? Okay, so directly maybe, so we don't forget the question. Yeah, go ahead, Mbak Titut. Please wait, yeah?
Okay, following the instruction from Mbak Dina, thank you for the questions, but I would like to compare first the cultural diplomacy between what I've just presented with Hallyu or Korean wave. So if you look at the Daisy Kim's articles in 2012, she said that cultural diplomacy of South Korea is also part of the global industry. So basically, Hallyu as the cultural diplomacy in South Korea is arranged by the government. They are protected by a number of governance, and they consider, the South Korean government consider all artists as the national capitals. They are under the South Korean governance management as the state apparatus. So basically, they are, what I'm trying to say, with the South Korean cultural diplomacy, the state has created a certain arrangement that governed all the artists, whether it is K-pop, K-drama, or others. Compared with Indonesia, my apologies saying this, but the Center of the Cultural Diplomacy until today is focused on the baby boomers who are sitting in the power. So those really refer to other scholarship are they have gap in navigating digital infrastructures, while the Gen Z, who are not sitting in the power, they are very cool in navigating digital sphere. So that's why in my presentation, I highlight how their creativity and the authenticity of DIY invite people voluntarily to join the cultural diplomacy. Sometimes conscious, sometimes unconscious. The best thing is, from this, at least I'm thinking about when the Axel Burns, he is a scholar from Australia, QUT University, argue that there is no filter bubble. Are filter bubble real? No. Basically, there is a human inherently hate or love something. It is not created by the algorithm or digital infrastructures. On the other way around, when we see this one, it means that collaboration, the nature of collaboration is also inherently human. So these Gen Z, with their skill to navigate the digital sphere, I hope they will open the eyes of the boomer who are sitting in the power that digital or cultural diplomacy is not that complicated. That the taste is very subjective, and we can share it through digital platforms. The negative impact that, because this is basically a cultural artifact owned by someone or a group, soon after they launched on digital sphere, they went unprotected. Copyright, when, everyone can infringe the copyrights. That's why my suggestion that in the last slide, I propose to the government to arrange, not like the South Korean government arranged the cultural diplomacy, but more, because now cultural diplomacy within the Indonesian context is very open and very genuine and informal. It is, I think, we can start from how the government protect the copyrights of the digital artifact that can bring the cultural diplomacy on the surface. That's my question. That's my answer. Thank you.
Was that answering your question? Do you have a follow-up? All good. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, applause perhaps from the questioner as well, and then for the answer with that. So I would like to give you, sir, your turn. Go ahead.
Thank you for the time. My name is Iqbalullah Hazar Ramadan. I came from State University of Surabaya. I would like to ask presenter, both of you, but maybe my question is maybe is half answered by Mrs. Enda, but I want to know further problems in our government, why we cannot did like South Korea to engage us like the artists or to save digital artifacts for further cultural diplomacy. Because I just feel a bit curious, what is further problems of our governments, except like Mrs. Indah said before, because some baby boomers who sit in our governments and etc. Maybe this is my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, yeah, this is very interesting. So perhaps we can ask Mbak Anindita first. And then I would like, of course, ask Mbak Titut for her opinion, perhaps, because he was asking two of the speakers, if you don't mind. Go ahead, Mbak Anindita.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. So I think the establishment of the Ministry of Culture is the first step to do that. And we are actually now developing a policy framework regarding the cultural diplomacy and also the CCI, which also will include some kind of Indonesian wave. So it's like our answer to these waves. So this is our we will sort of amplify our identity, and also we are still developing the whole policy framework for this, and hopefully by the end of this year we're gonna sign it, and also we're gonna publish it to the public. And also regarding the South Korea, we actually have some cooperations with them to regarding the content creation. We have the cooperation with KOCA. KOCA is the institution, Korean Cultural.
I forgot. Yeah, but it's a South Korean culture
South
agency.
Korean cultural agencies.
Yeah.
It's also the agencies that is responsible for the K-pop wave, K-wave, actually Hallyu, that they actually, it was designed, the wave was designed actually 20 years ago. And KOCA is actually the institution that is responsible for the Korean wave. And we actually already have an agreement with them last year. Sorry, I forgot, last year or this year? This year. It's already started in 6 cities. I think 2 cities in Java Island, and then 2 in Sumatra, and then 2 in eastern part of Indonesia. It's actually the cooperation is for content creation. So it's like a capacity building from the Korean artists, Korean content creators, and also the cultural practitioners here in Indonesia. That not only about the digital content like TikTok, Instagram, and so on, but also the film, animation, and also games and comics. And then we also have several co-production agreements with several countries that is also very robust in promoting their popular culture, including Japan. We also have an agreement with Japan, and also with the Netherlands and France. Actually, we signed 6 agreements with France when Macron visited Indonesia several months ago. So actually there are a lot of, it's still in the surface, but hopefully we can continue the work. Regarding the challenge, I think one of them may be already answered by Buanda, and that's why we want to see more young people to participate in the cultural ecosystem. That's why we also have the talent management, National Talent Management Program, or MTN, because we conduct it in schools. So actually we conduct it in elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. And also for a study with Maestro, we also open it for the young people. So actually it's not only about preserving or safeguarding the old or ancient cultural heritage, but also one of the mandates, actually 3 of the mandates of the cultural advancement are for development, cultural empowerment, and cultural utilization. So it's part of the mandates, and what we are doing, what we are pushing now with the new ministry. So maybe that's all from me.
Thank you, Mbak Ninita. Go ahead, Mbak Tito. Perhaps you have some additional perspective or...
Yeah. Japanese cultural diplomacy started when they start the Restoration Meiji, 1868. I forgot. And the South Korean culture diplomacy start when I think in 1997 or 2007, I think 2007. But the reason for both countries is because the condition of resistance. So the sense of resistance within the country, for the South Korea, for example, the bombarded from the Western policy, WTO, that limited the in-house production in South Korea in 1997, imposed them to exploit the internet in 2007, I think. The thing is with Indonesia, Indonesia has a vibrant cultures, heritage, which under the Suharto's regime, the government tried to make Indonesian culture as Japanese cultures. There is no sense of resistance against foreign or outside attack against our cultures. For example, with South Korea, since 1997, the Bearcraft, yeah, it is assigned straight away under the prime ministers. So it has like a massive power to arrange the governance of the culture inside the South Korea. The situation is quite different with Indonesia that has been busy with their own arrangement because we have competing cultures inside the country. Also because maybe, the sense of colonialism in Indonesia is so big. So we blinded by the westernized value. Then we are late to employ our cultural heritage as a tool to do or to deliver the cultural diplomacy. However, that's why in my presentation highlight the informal cultural diplomacy that I think even the Gen Z not aware about their potential in delivering that diplomacy. That they can be the state apparatus, the new state apparatus, the first, and the second, the algorithm as the state apparatus as well. So I think this forum is important because it invite all of us, collect us and connect us, let us to exchange the point of view from the practitioners and also the academics.
Yes.
But I think we still have lots to do because our awareness on what is culture, whether it is Japanese culture or Indonesian culture or whatever culture can be weaponized to enhance diplomacy is just recently, right? So that's my answer.
So the question is ended up to be another question. So what is culture? Actually, thank you so much for the questions. Thank you so much for the speakers. Please, I will invite us to give an applause. Thank you so much for a very good discussion. I would like to give room for the next panel. So back at you, MC. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
To our
Terima kasih,
speakers
Mbak.
and moderator for the very insightful panel session 4. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of applause. And I request the speakers and moderator to stand on the stage as we want to take a picture together. Okay. Beautiful. Thank you so much, ladies, for the very fruitful discussion in this 4th panel session. Our sincerest gratitude to our speakers and moderator, as well as you, our participants, for the very active engagement in this discussion. And ladies and gentlemen, with that thoughtful and very inspiring discussion just now, we are ready to continue. However, I would suggest that before we continue to the next plenary session, we should take a coffee break. So I encourage you to enjoy the refreshments we have provided outside of the auditorium, and we will see you back again at 4 p.m. for the next plenary session, which will be themed Soft Power Hard Questions, Rethinking Cultural Diplomacy. Once again, we will see you here at the auditorium for plenary session 5 at 4 p.m. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to Auditorium Juwono Sudarsono for the Indonesia International Conference on Cultural Diplomacy, Iiccd 2025. May I hear a big round of applause from all of you? Okay. With this time, I believe you're all refreshed now with the coffee break and the refreshments that we have provided outside. And I hope you're ready as we will discuss the role of influence of cultural diplomacy within broader global dynamics once more in this lovely afternoon. It is my honor to now open plenary session 5, Soft Power Hard Questions, Rethinking Cultural Diplomacy, where we will be joined by a panel of speakers that are wonderful, of course. Please help me welcome our speakers. First, we have Ms. Jacinta O'Hagan, Associate Professor at the School of Political Sciences and International Studies, University of Queensland. We have Sukiato Kurniawan, Assistant Curator of Cultural Lab. We have Ms. Carmina Untalan, International Relations Researcher at the Universidade Nova de Lisboa. And Ms. Anissa Gultam of the National Museum of Ras Al Khaimah, United Arab Emirates, who will be joining us online at a Zoom conference. And to moderate this absolutely substantial plenary session, we'll be joined by Mr. Yeremia Lalisang, PhD, Head of the Undergraduate Program of International Relations at Universitas Indonesia. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the plenary session 5, Soft Power Hard Questions, Rethinking Cultural Diplomacy. Please welcome our speakers and moderator for today.
A very good afternoon, everyone. I know it's been a long day. Thank you for staying with us, but I promise we do save the best for last. Although we all wear black, doesn't mean that this is like a somber presentation or what, but we're trying to bring up a very interesting conversation here because we have a very interesting panel lined up this afternoon. We will speak about museum diplomacy, heritage, and cultural diplomacy. Each speakers will bring various perspectives from their various backgrounds as well, and I'm very sure that this will be a very interesting discussion. And we will start with Associate Professor Jacinta O'Hagan. Without further ado, Jacinta, over to you.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone, and well done for still being here. That's absolutely fantastic. I'd like to start by thanking the Dean and the Faculty of International Studies and Political Science, and of course the Ministry of Culture, for inviting us here to this really fabulous conference. And I really want to thank as well the organising committee for how well they've been looking after us for the last couple of days. Get my clicker. We live in interesting times. International politics at the moment is characterised by uncertainty, by rupture, and by instability. We seem to be returning to great power rivalry: Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, Tehran, Venezuela. We see a willingness of great powers to use force, and we're seeing challenges to international law and international humanitarian law with impunity. Hard power, it seems, is resurging. The world's leading power and previous proponent of cultural diplomacy, the United States, is winding back. The Trump II administration continuing the pullback on cultural diplomacy we saw in its first term. Secretary Marco Rubio said that cultural or political issues that are deemed to be divisive would be deprioritized in diplomacy. And we've seen the defunding, for instance, of the Voice of America, a key proponent of cultural diplomacy. So is cultural diplomacy a dying art? Well, this conference suggests it's not. And if you've been at the fascinating panels here, you would have heard about how not only Indonesia, but Ukraine, the Netherlands, Kenya, are all critically engaging with cultural diplomacy and considering how you prioritize and promote it. So how do we understand cultural diplomacy in this context? Traditionally, we sort of associate cultural diplomacy with great powers and with the West and the dominance of the West and the capacity of the West to push and continue to exercise hegemony over other powers. But what we seem to be seeing is a reinvention of cultural diplomacy as being embraced as a vehicle by other powers to reset relations, to exercise agency, and to reclaim narratives in representation in international relations. So this is all really interesting. Now, Jeremiah has given us a very tough task. He's asked us to think about cultural diplomacy and power relationships, and to say, to what extent does cultural diplomacy actually reinforce traditional hierarchies of power? Is it the velvet glove around the iron fist? I'm on the wrong slide. There we go. My colleague and friend Patricia Goff talks about cultural diplomacy as a really fascinating place where art and power meet. And I want to investigate this relationship a little bit. The first thing I want to do is a bit boring. I do want to tell you what my working definition of culture is, but because I think it's important. So I talk about culture as a historically created system of meaning and significance, or what comes to the same thing, a system of beliefs and practices in terms of which human beings regulate and structure their individual and collective lives. Biku Parek. It's intersubjective. It concerns the creation of meaning. It's expressed through and embedded within languages, images, bodies, practices, and artifacts. It provides a way and frameworks within which we navigate the world, and it helps to shape our identity. It tells us who we are, what our values are, what our priorities are as individuals and as societies. What is it we seek to do and be in the world? But it is also heterogeneous. Yesterday we learned a great deal about the rich and multifaceted nature of culture in Indonesia and Southeast Asia, including indigenous cultures. It's fluid. It develops through interaction and in shifting contexts. And yesterday and today we talked a lot about hybridity, but it's also contested. It's contested because the capacity to shape systems of meaning and symbols and practices as authentic, some practices, some representations as authentic and legitimate, is highly political. And to be able to do that is a key element of power. So what kind of a form of power is culture? I have to talk about power because I'm an IOS scholar and I'm on the last panel. So power is really multifaceted. I use this definition of power. Power is the production in and through social relations of effects on actors that shape their capacity to control their fate. So it's the capacity to influence actors and how they control their fates. It's not simply consisting of material attributes, but also contrived and developed through social relations. And those social relations can have different forms. They can be compulsory. So this can be where an actor can directly control or affect the behavior of another. It can be institutional power. It can be the way that an actor can work through rules or procedures in formal or informal institutions to guide the behaviors of others. It can be structural power, the way in which we derive power from the way we're positioned in relation to one another, or it can be productive power. And productive power is the one that I think speaks most clearly to culture. So productive power is a systems or systems of knowledge and discourses through which meaning is produced, fixed, lived, experienced, and transformed. It's really important to the way in which we produce our sense of identity, but also, and our self-understandings, but also our idea about what our roles are and what our social capacities are. So culture is integral to productive power because it shapes meanings and our sense of identity, our understanding of our role, and our sense of what is true. Language is a really important dimension of this because it's not only a medium, a vehicle for communication, but it helps to frame our ontologies, and our epistemologies. So this, I think, is really, really critical. So let me move then to cultural diplomacy, and let me move to that other, and I won't go into this too much because we've had lots of definitions of diplomacy. But looking at diplomacy as in the classic way, as the capacity of the state to represent, to protect, to promote its interests, to collect and analyse information and encourage cordial relations. So diplomacy that we typically think of in the context of the state, the nation state, is a critical institution of international society. But as we've talked about quite extensively, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes, I've got kind of mixed up on my notes. But as we've talked about quite extensively today, increasingly we are seeing multiple actors being implicated in diplomacy as the networks and frameworks for diplomacy have spread out, as we've moved from diplomacy as club diplomacy to the idea of network diplomacy. So that presents us with really interesting kind of challenges about what is the role of the state then in the context of this form of diplomacy. So cultural diplomacy is a really messy concept. It's really hard to define, and we've seen so many definitions of it here today. One of the things I just want to talk about briefly here is the way that cultural diplomacy as culture and practice has evolved and changed in the context of shifts in structures in the international system. We see the emergence of cultural diplomacy as a concept in the 19th century, linked with this idea of the integrity of a particular culture, its superiority and its capacity to project that over other societies, such as in the civilizing mission of France, but also other European imperial powers. We also see the emergence of the idea of nationalism, the nation state, where the nation state starts to be seen as defined by a particular homogeneous type of culture. Cultural diplomacy, though, also became a really important part of liberal internationalism in the 20th century. And the previous speaker here from UNESCO talked about the role of cultural diplomacy as a key aspect of international diplomacy, the idea that culture can be a way that we breach gaps in our understanding, that we communicate with each other better, and therefore it's a way to peace and understanding. So we have a curious tension here about whether cultural diplomacy is about the pursuit of the national interest or if it's about the pursuit of the broader good, the greater good, as it were. But then we come to the Cold War, where we see cultural diplomacy really stepping out, becoming part of the language of statecraft, particularly in the United States and in the Soviet Union, where culture becomes consciously harnessed in the course of a battle of ideas between those two societies to win allies within those societies. And then we saw sort of cultural diplomacy fading off a little bit, but a resurgence in the context of the war on terror, where the United States in particular suddenly discovered that it had to tell people why it was a good society and why it was doing good things in the world. So with globalization, obviously, and we've talked about it a lot, with digital modes of communication, we've now seen the diffusion not only of diplomacy, but particularly the capacity for cultural diplomacy. And sometimes I think it's a little bit hard to know how we separate cultural relations and cultural interaction from cultural diplomacy. So there's key questions there about how do we operate cultural diplomacy in this context. I want to, if you would indulge me, tell you a little bit about two encounters I've had with cultural diplomacy. The first one is as the consumer of cultural diplomacy, and this is, and I'm dating myself, this is in the 1980s, and this is as an Irish scholarship student in China, where I was fortunate enough to win a scholarship to go and study in China. And it blew my mind, it opened my eyes up to a whole different way of thinking and knowing. But it also opened my mind to the importance of people-to-people relations in Chinese foreign policy, which in fact is a very, very old tradition. It's been part of Chinese foreign policy since the 1950s. Now today we know that China is a cultural diplomacy superpower, and we know this through the power, for instance, of the Confucius Institutes. And we've seen the way that China uses cultural diplomacy to recapture its narrative of its role in the world as a civilizational power, as a responsible great power. And I think this is a really interesting kind of, is it hegemonic or a counter-hegemonic discourse? I don't know, we can talk about that. Very briefly, my other personal encounter with diplomacy was a few years later when I was fortunate enough to get a job with the Irish Diplomatic Service. And I find myself quite surprised in Australia. And I thought I was going to be spending my time meeting ministries. I spent an awful lot of time doing cultural diplomacy. So culture was really incredibly important. It was going to St. Patrick's Day events, Rose of Tralee events, organising cultural exhibitions, beautiful cultural exhibitions that I was involved in, but also going to community events, chicken suppers. Because part of our cultural diplomacy was not only raising the profile of Ireland as its cultural heritage in Australia, but also reaching out to the important diaspora in Australia. And the work as a cultural diplomat, to reaching out to those diaspora communities, reaching out to the family overseas is an incredibly important part of Ireland's cultural diplomacy, and it remains part of that. So the diaspora and the domestic constituency, working with the diaspora, is incredibly important as part of the constituency of the Irish government. So cultural diplomacy is also a way to maintain connection and to connect. So Ireland's cultural diplomacy today continues to be really important. I've been fascinated looking at, for instance, China and Indonesia's cultural diplomacy in contrast. So Ireland's cultural diplomacy today is integrated into the broader remit of a strategy called Global Ireland, which has been a kind of a master plan from 2018 to 2025. The goal of Global Ireland as a whole of government involves all different government sort of ministries to build new partnerships, new business links, alliances, and make friendships. And importantly, to make Ireland's voice count for more on the international stage. So it's a way of trying to enhance Ireland's visibility, influence, and reputation. And so the policies are familiar. They include supporting creative industries, opening up Irish cultural centres overseas to open up those markets to new actors. There's also a really interesting program called the Shared Ireland Program, which is about using culture to reach across the border between Northern and Southern Ireland to build relationships there. But also a really important role in the promotion of the Irish language, both as a way of strengthening links with the diaspora, but also as a way of representing Ireland as a unique identity on the international stage. It's been lobbying strongly to make Irish an official language of the European Union. So just to recap on that, what I find interesting here is the way Ireland has incorporated its cultural diplomacy into broader practices of diplomacy that enhances Ireland's idea, basically its status as a post-colonial state, but also seeking to use it as a way of amplifying, as a small state, which doesn't have a lot of hard power, to amplify its voice on the international stage. So these are two examples, I think, where we can see cultural diplomacy is being used by different kinds of states as a counter, kind of like to counter the traditional power of the West or the United States or whatever. But I do want to end, and I will end here, with two caveats that I think speak to some of the items in the previous panel. Cultural diplomacy is not necessarily a fix-all. Cultural diplomacy can also breed tension and competition, and we talked about that over the last couple of days quite a bit. The relations between states and artists and local communities, I think, is really interesting. Who shapes the narratives? And can there be tensions between what the artists want? Are they happy for their art to be used as part of a political and diplomatic strategy? And lastly, and I think this is important because I don't think we've talked about this at all, which is the resurgence of ethno-nationalism and the resurgence of the use of culture and the creation of cultural identity, not as hybrid, not as cosmopolitan, but as purist, and actually the use of things like digital platforms to put forward a different form of cultural identity, which is not about building bridges across cultural community, but is about the opposite to that. My time is up, so I will end it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jacinta. I think, yeah, this past 2 days, we always talked about how cultural diplomacy can contribute to friendship among nations, mutual understanding, but Jacinta put a very important reminder to us. It is also can, of course, become a source of tensions. So, yeah, it's a very interesting notes to consider, yeah. Thank you so much, Jacinta. So our next speaker will be Carmina. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Okay, hello, good afternoon, everybody. So I'm not really a scholar of cultural diplomacy, so in a way, I'm quite privileged to be here. The title of this panel is Soft Power, Hard Questions. I don't have answers, but maybe I'll just throw more questions. I don't know if they're hard. That's not my slide. So here it goes. I kind of need my first slide. In any case, it's very difficult to talk in the last panel because a lot of wonderful presentations yesterday and today, and even with my co-panelists here, they already presented important points. So if I do some repetitions, pardon me. I'll just wait for the first slide. Okay, so this is the reason why I need my first slide. It's because of that painting by a Mozambican artist named Malangatanga, and the title of the painting is "The Future, the People and their cultural affirmation and their flight to the future." So this was painted shortly after independence, and you can actually see how immediate post-independence in colonized societies, they imagine the future. It's not about purity, search for authenticity, but it's actually more multicultural than that. But unfortunately, as Jacinta was already saying, we are probably experiencing a return of hard power. And international relations, unfortunately, both as a discipline and practice, remains bound to its rationalistic, instrumental, and strategic view, even if it's paying more attention to culture. This is exemplified by how culture has been transformed into a language of soft power, which the late IR feminist scholar L.H.M. Ling argued, soft power denies culture of any inherent power to reshape or co-create the state in ways previously not anticipated. So culture in this sense only functions as a diplomatic tool if it serves as an accomplice to the state. Ling suggests that culture, detached from its instrumentalist imperative, possesses its own power and agency, capable of subsuming soft power. So I think it's important to have a kind of a important separation sometimes between soft power and culture, and even helping redefine the state and its interests rather than the other way around. Well, the idea seems inspiring to a certain extent, and I think based on the presentations that we've heard, it's possible. However, an issue arises when we confront the dilemma of cultures being forced to serve the interests of their masters. And by masters, I don't mean just Europeans, former colonizers. I also mean the state. I also mean the industry. I also mean the tech bros, the tech bros that conspire. They all conspire to sustain what Hart and Negri called empire. And this dilemma, I think, is poignantly captured by a very, very wonderful documentary. I recommend you to watch it. It's called The Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat by Belgian filmmaker Johan Grimont-Press. It's very, very good, but I recommend you watch it with a nice sound system because it's the jazz that makes it wonderful. So this documentary was set in the early years of Republic of Congo's independence, and it tells the story of how the United States, through the CIA, deployed world-renowned jazz artist ambassadors. They call them jazz ambassadors, like Louis Armstrong, Nina Simone, and Duke Ellington, to perform for Africans. They were used as smoke screens to cover up the political meddling in Africa, particularly in the overthrow and assassination of Democratic Republic Congo's first democratically elected leader, Patrice Lumumba. So that's him. Behind the well-attended jazz concerts, fanfare, and celebration of Black transatlantic coming together through culture was the Cold War. So it was mentioned earlier as well. And the desire to maintain the colonial power stronghold after independence. on the Congolese mining industry, where the United States previously obtained the uranium they used to build the atomic bomb that hit Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and also parts of the cell phones and laptops we're using today. The stuff there were still obtained from Congo. There are various lenses to look at this. You can look at it from the perspective of capitalism, neocolonialism, imperialism. But today, I kind of want to look at it from the prism of cultural diplomacy. And the dilemma for Black jazz artists is very important because it relates to the competition or the tension between domestic and international politics. So at home, they were fighting racial injustice, okay? This was in the 1960s, okay? But abroad, they were supposed to promote global intercultural relations between the US and former colonies. So the dilemma is this: what if culture, in this case jazz music, created as a form of protest and expression of identity at home, was co-opted to serve the opposite end abroad, okay? And this was during the Cold War, but I think, and this is not exclusive to the West, when I think about this dilemma, I think about the non-West as well. Case in point, Narendra Modi's yoga diplomacy. Yoga is different, and then you send it abroad, and India looks good and peaceful and all that, but it's not the case. In any case, for less powerful countries, the question remains, how can we maintain ownership? And by ownership, I don't mean like possessiveness or competitiveness, but ownership in terms of culture and protecting against the masters and its representation, so they do not betray the redemptive purpose of constructing communities and dismantling hierarchies. Or, to put differently, how can diplomacy be a means to represent identities, peoples, and societies to the world and to welcome otherness? So you shouldn't be shy to be another. It's about welcoming otherness as integral to world making without giving way to neocolonial interests or being subject to exotization, or worse, being sold as a bargaining chip with other countries. These are harsh questions, but soft power hard questions. And I think this question is important because it's an exercise of self-reflexivity on our part, where Europe or other external entities as a point of reference, whether it's positive or negative, recedes. So it's not just always about showing to the West or the world what we are, but it's also about reflecting of what we want to become. Okay. And personally, I'm also a product of cultural diplomacy, student exchange, scholarships, and so on and so forth. And I'm sometimes wary of being simply a native informant or a tokenistic representation from the quote-unquote global South. So there are, of course, many theoretical practices and practical answers to this question. So you have a lot of answers coming up already in the duration of this conference. And my contribution will be somewhat tangential. And I want to rethink the concept of culture, specifically learning from anti-colonial thinkers. So why anti-colonial thinkers? I mean, they're products of the past, but again, like what Yere was saying yesterday, we should not forget the Bandung spirit. It's very important. So anti-colonial thinkers were not cultural diplomats in the strict sense. They were not state representatives for the simple reason that they didn't have a state during this time. In fact, some of them were targets of cultural diplomacy from the metropole, from the colonizer, whose main objective was to assimilate the natives into the European way of life and hopefully become part of the colonial apparatus. Okay. However, for their profound insights into the colonial condition and activities they carried out to liberate, anti-colonial thinkers may be very well considered as cultural emissaries, opening up the means for intercultural understanding between the colonizer and the colonized, not only that, but among the colonies as well, because sometimes we kind of forget that even the former colonies are also fighting each other. It's not just this neat binary. And they were the living negations of the colonialist mindset that the native possesses no culture and must be subjected to certain forms of civilizing education. Culture in the colonial sense was broadly construed as something that the colonizers possessed. Anti-colonial thinkers, by virtue of being exposed to both sides, because many of them were educated in France, in Portugal, in Spain, they were occupying two worlds, and new conceptions of culture emerged during those travel in and out of the colony and the metropole. So for today, I would like to discuss Amilcar Cabral. I intentionally inserted an African person just to kind of have this whole idea of intercontinental relations. So we learn from Indonesia, we learn from Southeast Asia, but I think we also should learn from Africa. So Amilcar Cabral was a Capo Verdean anti-colonial intellectual who led the Piaggese. It's an independence movement against the Portuguese colonized metropole. He was a product of cultural diplomacy. He was able to study agronomy in Lisbon through the exchange program. And actually, at some point in his life, he also worked for the government as an agronomist. But later, he became one of the most prominent anti-colonial thinkers from Africa, alongside Frantz Fanon, Leopold Senghor, and Aimé Césaire. This is his most famous picture, so people want to depict him as a militant, but actually he spent most of his time traveling, speaking to the United Nations. He spoke in the Tricontinental Conference, and he also spoke in universities in New York. So for me, Cabral's view of culture is quite significant. He thinks culture is an act of national liberation, and by liberation, it's not only from the colonies, but also from the colonized own entrapment with traditions and nativism. For Cabral, culture is a manifestation of material and economic political realities of the dominated, and it's a proof of the impossibility of complete domination. It is simultaneously the fruit of people's history and a determinant of history by positive and negative influence it exerts on the evolution between man and his environment. So his view of culture is very dialectical. So culture cannot be separated from politics, it cannot be separated from economics, and I think this is very important. In addition, to successfully assert one's culture, one must pay attention to the importance of integrating cultural differences from within and simultaneously developing grassroots and national culture. So in other words, without one, the other would fail. You know, he was very tough. In fact, he was assassinated by his own fellow men. And I think this is why Piaget said the independence movement was exemplary, because they initiated local education. They kind of nourished grassroots culture first before they went out of doing cultural diplomacy. So in this case, in the case of Piaget, it was so successful that, you know, Swedish photographers and cameramen, and eventually the Swedish government helped them with their education platforms. So it's kind of, the recognition they got was not the intention. It was an after effect of cultural cultivation, which is a very interesting story. I will now go briefly to Rizal. Yesterday we were talking about how books are quite eternal. They last long. And Jose Rizal is one of our prime cultural diplomats. So 130 years after his death, Rizal is still our cultural diplomat, because anywhere you see Rizal, it's the Philippines, right? But another question that comes to my mind is, whenever I see Rizal abroad, you know, in Madrid, he has a monument. Is the Philippines, or is my country, stay faithful to their works and what they symbolize? Or like what the previous speaker yesterday, is it just, has Jose Rizal for us just became a national branding? And it's actually quite scary if you come to think of it. Again, going back to the question, the jazz becoming smoke screens for national interest, and maybe Jose Rizal too just becomes like, oh, Philippine independence. But what is our status now? So I think my point is that when we talk about cultural diplomacy, hard questions, we have to also talk about the domestic politics and how it relates to the international level. So what conditions are necessary to maintain ownership over one's culture? By ownership, again, I mean against the master. And I think we have to cultivate a strong and grounded cultural understanding within society, you know? And cultural diplomacy should be a reflection of local, political, and material realities rather than serve as smokescreen that hides them. I think that's what makes culture lose its meaning, when it just becomes a brand and then you forget what it's about. And consistency is about what we present abroad and what's going on at home. I mean, if you want to be taken seriously, for example, then it has to be consistent, right? And I think that's what the Amilcar Cabral tried to do. He was going to the UN talking about independence, but at the same time, he was also showing to the world that the Capo Verdeans and the Guineans were capable of cultivating their own culture. So it's consistent. And I think one of the things that I want to present, and I used to study Okinawa, this picture is during the 1903 pavilion. Japan, yes, has been practicing cultural diplomacy, and this is what was done to Okinawa. Okinawa was showcased as the proof that in Japan you also have uncivilized. Taiwanese were also part of the exhibition. It's very interesting. But now Okinawa kind of transcended that. Like, no, we're not going to be presented as the indigenous side of Japan, but we have to promote the culture of peace through their politics of anti-military bases. Again, the consistency between culture and what's going on in the local. I would like to end my presentation with batik. This is a kind of, I just remembered yesterday because everybody was talking about batik. And I remember an anecdote. I was chatting over lunch with my colleagues back in Lisbon. And they were talking about a conference they attended in Dakar, and there was some sort of argument about batik. Because apparently, and this I didn't know, maybe you know more about it, the African wax cloth, it's also very famous, was brought by the Dutch in the 19th century when the Dutch began industrializing batik production. So there are three ways to look at it. So the African wax, which they think was a symbol of their culture, you know, and then you have batik, which is also stands the same. There are three ways to look at it. And my colleagues, I was just eating my lunch. I was just listening to them chatting. My colleagues were doing this, and there were three interpretations emerging from that conversation. One is the Eurocentric view. See, the Dutch, they were able to transport one culture to another and let it flourish. Yeah? I mean, it's valid. I mean, it's fact. They were the ones who brought it there. So, okay, that's a view. The second is the competitive and possessive view. One of my colleagues said, yeah, you know, they're so proud of the African wax cloth, but apparently it came from Indonesia. So why are they so proud? So which culture produces the better cloth? But the third view is interesting. It's the relational and decolonized view, which means that the cloth, these pieces of culture can travel, brought by Europe, but then you can just reinterpret it as a way of intercultural and relational understanding, which I think is echoed by the idea given by the UNESCO representative, sorry, I forgot her name, that these are things that maybe we can cultivate, like knowing the history, maybe the Dutch and the Indonesians and the West Africans could come up with a plan to preserve the value of these cloths and not just, you know, serve as my time is up, okay. And then, yeah. But thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Mina. I think, thank you for highlighting how domestic and external environment are not really that separated. And thank you for the very provocative conclusions. Should then we celebrate National Batik Day next year? Or, because we have National Batik Day in Indonesia. So should we celebrate it? Hard questions. Okay. Okay. So the next speaker will be my dear friend and colleague Sukiato Kurniawan. Yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yeremia. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's really good to see you all here, and also honor and pleasure to meet all the speakers. My name is Sukiato Kurniawan, or usually people call me Suki. I'm a curator from Culture Lab Consultancy. Culture is a social enterprise with the mission to help building museums and exhibitions worldwide. So, like Carmina, I'm not a people of cultural diplomacy. I'm a geologist, and then turned into archaeologist, and then turned into curator. So I don't know what my life gonna drive me apart. So yeah. When talking about cultural diplomacy, we would like to proudly inform you that Culture Lab had taken part in the formations of this permanent exhibition in the UNESCO headquarters called Jalan Nusantara, or in English it's called Archipelago Street. It actually showcased 11 of many cultural gifts from Indonesia to UNESCO from after the World War II, I think, as a form of cultural diplomacy. Yeah, so as well as we also show like some objects like this, Garuda Wisnu Kencana, robot angklung, and then a painting of Kamasan, and then replica of ancient human skulls, and yeah, Samudra Raksa, Prambanan, Borobudur, and etc. So we also do like digital maps and inventories that of a few of the 66 UNESCO cultural and natural heritage sites in Indonesia. So, but for this talk, because our session is about rethinking cultural diplomacy, I would like to touch upon the theme, a sub-theme of counter-narrative and also the colonized alternative. So I will present two exhibitions that we organized. One just finished earlier this month, and the other one is still actually ongoing. So we will discuss how critical art and history exhibitions adopting the colonial perspective could function as tools for cultural diplomacy. So it's actually, we're talking about pain and uncomfortable questions actually. So yeah, the first one that I'm gonna discuss is the exhibition Beyond Unsettled Past at Erasmus House, which ended 2 weeks ago. Yeah, so this exhibition actually talks about the colonial legacy in Indonesia, which is, it's still very much live in the contemporary life today, or what Anibal Kiano said, the coloniality. Colonial legacies are sometimes unnoticed, even though they are actually like very close present and create sustainable problems in our contemporary Indonesia. So I usually call these legacies as the colonial ghosts or colonial shadows. And our aim of this exhibition is actually so that all of us, from any kind of background and age, and with different life experience, we can understand the pain that the colonial system had done to us, to our society, and in a global relevance. And also to share our experience that might be influenced or framed by this system, and together we can spark or even formulate a way out of it. So these exhibitions involve 6 artists, as you can see on the slides. We have Elia Nurvista, who talks about the history of oil palm plantation brought here to Indonesia, to the Netherlands, East Indies, during the colonial time, and also their social, economic, cultural continuation until today. And we also have Budi Agung Kuswara, who talks about how women were exoticized and objectified through the colonial photograph, colonial archive, and also colonial male gaze, and how to critically counter them. Then we also have Maharani Mancanegara, who talks about who should be called as hero, and who gets to bestow someone the status of hero. So I'm going to pause there for some effect, because it really relates to Indonesia. This is also revolves around superiority and inferiority complex in Indonesian society today. The next one is Alduin Pradipta and Dita Gambiro. Both are the artworks that converse to each other. They talk about the implication of racial and cultural segregations in the architectural elements and city planning. And the last one is the senior artist Aramayani, through the installations of flags, which is called the Flag Project. We propose the local values such as love, bravery, hand in hands, and then heart or heart, understanding, community, gotong royong, all these values which have been erased and sidelined by the colonial power as a tool to heal from this colonial trauma. And yeah, what is also exciting is that these exhibitions is actually set in Erasmus House, which is in the vicinity of the Dutch embassy. So Erasmus House is actually one of a kind Dutch cultural house in the world, outside the Netherlands, to promote the Dutch culture and its continuation. So the establishment of Erasmus House is also the product of the success of the cultural diplomacy in the 1970s, when Indonesia, under the new order, opened the gate for Western influences compared to the more selective and careful approach during the Sukarno's era. So doing a critical exhibition in this space, in the vicinity of the Dutch embassy, is actually like, yeah, could be seen as an element of today's cultural diplomacy as well. So in the exhibition, we actually facilitate the topics with educational programs like curatorial tours and artist talk, where people come and share about their stories, perspective, and also memories, sometimes very painful memories, to validate and discuss the experience of their own and the other participants. It's actually a true moment of reflection and dialogue. And we also, in this exhibition, we provide kids' zine and kids' labels and questions to stimulate conversation with themselves and their guardians about these issues. So, and as you can see on the right side, not only the kindergarten and primary school children loving doing the zine, but also 25-year-old kid, 45-year-old kid, and 65-year-old kids also do that. Yeah. So on the survey that we conducted, we received immersive responses, and most of them praised that it was really eye-opening, insightful, and also fun. And we also received a lot of responses that said that the exhibition resonated with the personal and family experiences, and surprised to learn that they have roots in deep history and not necessarily a new thing. So some link the theme with their experiences, such as growing up in the rubber or oil palm plantation, some in the Chinatown, which had become the target of violence in 1998. Some also share the experience as women under the pressure of patriarchy. So these topics actually are very close to them and everyone, and not only for the younger generations, but also for the older generations. So in conclusion, the responses, especially from the young generation, show that they see history and art as becoming essential to see to how they see themselves today. History is not something in the past, but something relevant and alive. And the combination of art, history, and also the space have allowed them to reflect, to question, and to connect this narrative to their own life and the others, to the formation of their identity and belonging, which I argue become significant as the unit of cultural relations and diplomacy. So, but we will get back to the reflections about cultural diplomacy at the end of my presentation. The next exhibition that's still running today is the exhibition at Museum Pusaka Nias, which actually has been also mentioned yesterday by Prof. Irmawati, the repatriations of Nias collections. But this one, this exhibition especially talks about the Nias plaster cast. So it's entitled Melihat di Balik Wajah Ononiha, or Looking Behind the Faces of the People of Nias. This exhibition is based on the result of research initiated by the Pressing Matter in the Netherlands. And the team consists of Dr. Sadia Boonstra from Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, and also the director and founder of Culture Lab. And also Letitia Lai from Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, and Dr. Gert-Jan Ples from Utrecht University. In collaborations also with Universitas Nias Raya, or Uniraya, and University Museum Utrecht, and while the exhibition is organized by Culture Lab. So this research touches the subject of finding the future of museum objects or museum collection. For example, one of the options is for repatriations, or if it sounds too male-centric, we can also call it repatriation, or more neutral, we can call it return. Yeah. So yeah. And also the cross-cultural collaborations that it produced, which is a forum of cultural relations and diplomacy as well. And also, yeah, to formulate the best future of these objects. So before I go to the next slides, I want to warn you that some pictures in these slides might be a bit uncomfortable, because we'll be talking about the faces that has been casted, so it looks like a mess, and when they display it, it looks like beheaded heads. So if you're feeling unease, please do anything that will make you comfortable. So, yeah, this is the team. The left one, as you can see, is the team from the Pressing Matter, and also some from Uniraya. On the right is primarily from Pressing Matter, and also from Museum Pusaka Nias. Yeah, in fact, at this moment that we are speaking, Sadia, the director, is actually in Nias, still continuing the research on this exhibition. So yeah, so I'm sorry. Okay, so this is about the facial plaster cast of Nias people that was made by the guy on the left, Johannes Pieter Kleve Divesand, in the 1910 during his fieldwork in Nias. So this happened during the peak period of racial studies, and they were displayed in Rijksmuseum, but since then had been returned to Utrecht University Museum, because there are so many responses that saw this as very frightening, and also is it still ethical to present the face, the body parts of the ancestors? So, but the question then arises, what is the best future for this plaster cast if showing it in the museums is no longer ethical? So then present matter team, Sadia, Leticia, Hertian, then did the research with the partners in Nias and found so many interesting layers of knowledge. So the first thing that the research team did was the provenance research, like the other research for repatriation. And looking at the materials, notes produced, books written by Divesand, and etc. And from there, information led to another one, and it finally create a rigid stories, very interesting stories, but also painful ones. So in Divesand's publication, there was a list of names of the people whose faces were cast, and along with the surname or clan name and where they lived. And together with the Museum Pusaka Nias, they were trying to understand the names of the people that has been listed here in this table, and also to update it with the contemporary spelling. And that's when they found some interesting information. As you can see, for example, this number 40, the name of the person is written in the book as Gyodo, and he's come from the family of Baiha, from the village of Afulu. But then after the reassessment by the team from Uniraya, collaborating with local people, they found out that the name Gyodo means nothing, but if Gyodeu, it means mouse tail, which is like a very uncommon name. Like, it's a joke, like mouse tail. So actually we see it maybe as an act of resistance from the people who's being cast, yeah. Because at the time, many times they were forced to do the casting under pressure, yeah. Maybe they were afraid that the real name will be registered somehow and later they will be kidnapped and sold as a slave. Because at the time it's still pretty much happening. So it's a good example of doing like a detailed research and also collaborating with the local people who has the knowledge to do it. And also there are some photographs taken by Divesand, and after thorough, careful examination, they can like connect 4 of the plaster casts with the photos. And if you look at the people on the lower left, Lucy who show uncomfortable or even like painful expressions compared to the people number 1, sorry, Hono Hono and also Waoma. Yeah, and also if you see Yalawangi on the right corner, he also like show very discomfortable. Yeah, and you also can see that the hair, they were short. Yeah, very short, like freshly cut. Why is it like this? It is because the process of plaster making is not comfortable at all. Yeah, they have to lie down on the ground for hours with all of the gypsum placed all over their face. And in the case of the Divesand, he did not make a hole on the nose for breathing. Yeah, and also did not put the oil first so that when you take it off, it will like becomes easy. But he intentionally did not place the oil to cast everything like in the perfect condition, like it is. And as you can see, in the plaster cast in the face below, the yellow one, there are still original hairs attached to it. So Divesand also had to shave their hair of these people to make the process of casting easier and not many hairs that have been pulled out, but it still happened. Meanwhile, we can understand that hair and also like head are actually like very sacred to Nias people. So we can see the whole element of violence in producing this. And then the research team tried to track down the living descendants of these people by visiting the villages listed in the table. And finally they found one of the descendants of person, Katumbuha, that the face you can see on the left part. And they finally found the person on the right. So they are like the second and the third generations of the younger brother of Katumbuha. So not the direct descendants, but from the side of the brother. Yeah. And from then we know the story of Katumbuha because it's actually been like a living story and history of the family. So Katumbuha is actually the head of a groups of village in Nias. So now it's called Tuheneri. So the kampung is called the Eri. So the head is called Tuheneri. So pretty much it's actually like the camat in Indonesian system now. So he is like a very great deal person. So because he's one of the important figures in the government system, perhaps he could not say no when Divesand came and wanted to make the plaster cast. So yeah, this is the village and also the the tomb of Katumbuha and then the descendants. Yeah, the Katumbuha is, I think, the one that looks like a monument on the back. Okay, so what is also interesting is the Divesand mostly collected the mass on the northern western part of the Nias, but he did not penetrate South Nias because he was contracted with malaria and also had to leave earlier than planned. But it's good to see that this practice of Mbawa Behu, or the ghost face, or wearing this mask that's very fierce and fearful, which actually practiced mostly in the South Nias, and contrasting it with the face mask created by Divesand. So when the Nias people wear the mask to hide their identity during battles, during spying, during the ceremonies, Divesand exposed and immortalized it in the form of a plaster cast. So we can see like all these layers of colonial gaze they still have. Okay, yeah, I'm gonna fast forward. So yeah, this is all the research that they did. So they also like do some interview, the public lecture and knowledge exchange, and also focus group discussions with the whole community. But also the people from Uniraya went to Utrecht to see the mass directly, and it's a very emotional moment. Yeah. People were crying to see the faces of the ancestors, so it's very touching. So I'm gonna talk quite a bit fast, because I've been warned by Yere, about the exhibition itself. So yeah, for the exhibition, we of course like did a critical exhibition, not only about the plaster cast, but the whole wider context of the making itself, about the colonial system in Nias. And on the right side, you can see the faces and the name list of the people whose faces were cast. We also encourage the visitors coming from whole directions of Nias to help us and become the agents in this research. So for example, they could check if the village name is actually in the list. And when they find it, they need to look at the name of the family clan. Perhaps they know someone with the surname still living in the same village or not. And if yes, maybe they can help to like dig, are the people casted as actually the direct descendants of the people that's still living in their village. So with also international visitors were invited to think about this history, the painful history, and also to contemplate how they feel or can do. So there is of course the cultural context here, and in the mission that would emerge and could perhaps be seen as the unit of cultural diplomacy. So we also did like some participative elements. We asked questions to people, to visitors, and they also can like a response. Have you ever heard about the story of this plaster cast before? And if you have, you color it with blue, and if not, we color it with the red. So we know like the statistics, we get the numbers. And for the second one, maybe we also ask, how do you feel after hearing the story about this story of plaster cast in the exhibition? And surprisingly, people were saying like, oh, I'm so proud, but also like a lot of people were mad here. So like mixed responses. And also, we want to know what's the meaning of this plaster cast to the people living today. Are they just keys to the past? Okay, this is history. Are they like art objects? Are they like have a scientific marvel? Or they see it as actually their ancestor? Or maybe they have another opinion, so we make a room for interpretation. And also, what should happen to the plaster cast of Ononiha in the Netherlands? Is it to be returned to Nias, to the descendants of the people that's still living, it remains in the Netherlands, or what? So, as you can see in the post-it, the blue post-it, it says like, oh yeah, maybe better to return it to Nias or to Indonesia because this is like a heritage. And on the right side is the person say like, it's better to leave it in the Netherlands because they can take care of it and we cannot. So it's like, yeah, every opinion is valid and we need to see how it's rolling. So yesterday during the opening of the exhibition, they also made the cast of the plaster cast. So it's another, you know, but then when they returned it, gave it to the family, it was a very emotional moment as well. Yeah, so the person who holding the plaster cast is actually the grandchildren of the brother of Katumbuha. And he still remembered how Katumbuha looked like and he confirmed it. So it's very emotional. And he also like, oh yeah, Katumbuha was like a big person and he liked to wear this brown hat, which is like very uncommon during that time. So now with the return of this object, the family history will stay alive. So my last remarks, when we talk about cultural diplomacy, because I'm not orang HI, I tried to find the definition in the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy. And the is actually always about national and international interests. But it's also good to see that it's actually not only conducted by government bodies, not G2G, but also private entities and civil organizations. So it's pretty much what already been covered by this research. But to me, an exhibition is a smaller unit or method, but very meaningful form of cultural diplomacy. Art and exhibition could be used as a safe space where people from different backgrounds can confront the naked truth and the painful truth of lived history and also story, to recalibrate their mutual understanding and engage emotionally. So however small impact that it causes, it contributes to a large narrative, ultimately supporting and enriching the cultural diplomacy between nations to nations that we commonly understood. And diplomacy doesn't have to be this familiar form of like, I please you and you please me, we exchange gifts and etc. So it's like it's always operating in a comfortable bubble. Yeah, like especially when we talk about government, you're also like, oh yeah, we have to give it like a neutral or maybe like, yeah, please people, don't talk about uncomfortable issues. But sometimes we need to blow the uncomfortable issues once in a while into this bubble so it will expand and touching something beyond imagination and resolve complicated and deeply rooted issues like this. Yeah, so from the exhibition of Beyond Answer Past, I can understand that with the colonial lens, it invites encounter between identities, nationalities, and cultures, and being more critical about power imbalances, exchange of perceptions and memories, and even act as a moment for trauma dumping. So we can heal together, okay? And also for the Nias research, I think it's important to note that repatriations or rematriation or return of cultural objects as a form of cultural diplomacy does not always occur between governments. It's not always G2G. It can also emerge through exchange between communities. And this project serves as a model of a thoughtful, holistic approach to repatriation research. One that integrates not only provenance research, including the historical and legal aspects, but also ethical considerations and personal as well as collective histories, memories, and voices. So yeah, I think the last part is very important. In seeking meaningful relations to repatriation and also sustaining cultural relationship. And yeah, we can talk more about repatriation in the discussion session because Sadia and I are actually in several ways also involved in repatriation for the last few years. So you can download the exhibition booklet via this QR code. So yeah, thank you. I give it back to you.
Thank you so much, Suko, for highlighting how cultural diplomacy so acknowledge different voices and be brave to discuss uncomfortable facts of our histories, of our past. So our next speaker will be Anissa Gultom. She's joining us from UAE online. Okay, you are there. Hi,
yeah,
Anissa.
I'm here. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. And I gather you also wear black, similar to us on the panel. So definitely cultural diplomacy has connected all of us here with black color. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. To minimize the technical problems, Anissa has kindly recorded her presentation, but Anissa will be staying with us up until the Q&A session. Should I play your presentations now?
But I changed it a bit.
I think it's already playing.
Oh,
I can hear it.
Okay, maybe another technical issues then. Okay, let me settle this. Okay, can we start from the beginning, Mas?
Words in the context of museum decolonization trend in 2019.
Can we replay it?
Inspired by the poet Audre Lorde's essay in 1984. Lorde's essay, The Master's Tool will
Can we
never
start from the
dismantle
beginning?
the Master's House.
Bisa mulai dari depan lagi? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, here you go.
Museum is the master's house. Sumaya Kasim appropriated these words in the
This is the
context of
second slide,
museum
actually.
decolonization trend in 2019. She's inspired by the poet Audre Lorde. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, selamat sore hadirin semuanya. Terima kasih kepada panitia atas kesempatan yang diberikan kepada saya untuk berbagi buah fikir dan sudut pandang saya pribadi di dalam topik museum, diplomasi, dan otoritas. Presentasi hari ini nantinya akan bisa diakses di Akademia Edu. Moving forward, I will continue in English. Thank you for the organizer for the time that has been given to me to share my thoughts and personal perspective in the topic of museum, diplomacy, and authority. The original sub-theme given was Museum Diplomacy and Culture Authority, but I changed it a bit because, well, I will try to explain myself throughout this presentation. This presentation file will be later on accessible through my page in Academia Edu. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi. Museum is the master's house. Sumaya Kasim appropriated these words in the context of museum decolonization trend in 2019. She's inspired by the poet Audre Lorde's essay in 1984. Lorde's essay, "The Master's Tool Will Never Dismantle the Master's House." It was included in her 1984 collection, Sister Outsider. The essay argues that systemic change requires different approaches than those used to create the existing oppressive structures. Sumaya included this statement in her essay, "The Museum is the Master's House," an open letter to Tristram Hunt, director of the Vienna Museum, London. Sumaya defines the museum as repetitious placeholders presented to us as the smooth, untroubled waters of an objective reality. The texture of colonial violence is often smooth, bureaucratic, and impartial. The museum that we, post-colonial countries, understand is something formed by colonialism. The institution that was originally to inspire morphed into something to conspire, covering the ugly truth under the colonial fantasy of exotic paradise. The colonial exposition in Europe still continued until today, taking form in different names, such as World Expo or diplomatic missions. This is the softening of the colonial violence that Sumaya mentioned. Ironically, as I remember in my younger years, to be part of these missions abroad is something that we all competed to be in. European museums built in the peak of colonial wealth that does not always soften the colonial violence. The previously known Tropen Museum very eagerly displayed the colonial's land as the foundation of Dutch wealth. In the museum, you can see how indigenous human resources as the core part of the industry, such as this Aceh man holding a handrail used to dig oil well. The work is aptly titled as Industry. Another forthright sample of the colonized Dutch on their champion industry in East Indies is this man and machine statue, showing a barely clothed fit-able body of a Javanese man with a diesel machine on his lap. The work is part of the display in the Rijksmuseum 20th Century Gallery, and its caption says, "This work symbolized the progress that the Netherlands envisioned to bring to Indonesia." My response, LOL. This installation of plaster mask of Nias men has since removed from the Rijksmuseum since the last time I saw them in 2018, and it has been returned, I believe, to the Utrecht University Museum, the original owner. Visitors can still gaze to some samples out of the total 64 Nias men faces available in the basement of the Carolian Bleecker building in the Utrecht Science Park. These masks were made in the 1907 to 1910 study by Amsterdam-based physical anthropologist Johannes Peter Kleewig de Zwaan. The scientist studied the men as his study subjects. observing their living conditions, their habits, which later published as empirical descriptions. The masks that were molded in 1910, in the end, never used as part of any scientific research, as at the time, an idea that one would be able to come to biological conclusion by looking at a person's look has lost its credibility. It is important to note that Nias Island is among the lesser islands in the archipelago where their people were taken as slaves. So, in this case, consent is something that would be a concern. The university worked with the Pusaka Nias Museum and able to trace the names of these men and the villages where they live. Without all of this knowledge about the men and the research, just knowing a little bit about the research based on the caption, the first time I saw this mask, my body shakes, and 3 letters come into my mind: WTH. Why? How? I mean, the caption available it was not helpful. It's not really explaining how can you make something like this. And at the time, I was visiting the museum as part of the Dutch culture program that organized a dialogue between cultural professionals coming from post-colonial states, joined by one colonial history professor from the UK. I asked the group, a little bit holding my tears, how is this normal? Was this normal back then? Colonization did not only exploited the natural resources, but they also robbed these men's consent and taken away their visual identity as tokens. Wouldn't this be grinding your gear? The installation was located on a space-dividing wall, not so big, and so I see often people just went through it. They didn't really realize it's there. It was in the middle of that floor of the 20th Century Gallery, and next to it is this short duration video showing an Indonesian man wearing a black kopia, a national, we call it kopia, a national headdress popularized during Sukarno's time. The kopia man demonstrates a Merdeka greetings. Merdeka, it means freedom. This greeting was popular when the Nusantara archipelagos was struggling for their independence from the Dutch, especially towards the second half of the 1950s. Well, that's tense, isn't it? But we're not done yet. In my visit to the Rijksmuseum's 19th century galleries back in 2018, I witnessed the museum diplomacy as it has been designed by the colonial entities. Here showing the great Javanese, local kings in their chosen royal attire, including one who has adopted the European style of military adorned jacket. It is interesting to see that they placed the little people in a local market miniature right in front of the large-scale profile. And not too far from that, this wall displays a selection of items that in the beginning does not show any clear connection. After observing for some time, I guess I made ideas of the wall's theme. It looks like a wall of fame for the Dutch side and the wall of defeat for the indigenous of East Indies. Wall of loot can also be appropriate for this. Let's have a look of what's on there. So a Dayak war shield, that's number 1, taken from the Aceh War, which was considered as one of the strongest resistance at the time from the Dutch point of view, and considered by the Indonesian as one of the last strongholds against the colonial government. And in the center is the infamous Dutch version of the capture of Prince Diponegoro, a historical figure chosen as one of the national heroes in the context of anti-colonial struggle for freedom. And then next to it, and number 3 is a much smaller painting portraying a wounded African Kanal soldier. These African Kanal soldiers were among many that was sent to Aceh War. And last but not least, the Banjarmasin Sultanate's diamond. The painting of the prince had a slight difference of translation in the caption. in the original Dutch version, underworping, I hope I said it correctly, means surrender, was being used, giving the connotation of being passive, giving up, defeated. While in the New English version, the word chosen is arrest. He is arrested, signaling the active connotation of struggle and resistance. So far, I have shown you what is still commonly found as a form of museum diplomacy, inherited from the colonial entities, can be found in the colonizer, previously colonized, or currently being occupied regions. A few points can be used to identify this phenomenon. Paradise is always the blanket theme. It's a propaganda on the top of the misery of the exotic, or the less fortunate majority of the population. And there's always a lot of blood. No small scales, never small scale. The bigger the mortality, the larger ROI. Then there's always the local hero, which called as rebels, thugs, pirates. And often found, there's always a British attack somewhere. But in the past years, some large museums made some changes, including the Rijksmuseum. Oh, mashallah. This is a screen capture from a series episode produced in 2020. The title was Struggle for Freedom, an overview of collaborative curatorial study on the story of Prince Diponegoro and how it inspired Indonesia's struggle for freedom. You can see how the shield and the soldiers are absent from the wall. The significant change happened when the growing movement of indigenous groups claiming back their treasure, and the switch of perspective in European museum is going towards the same way, while the popular art is now sounding the same message. 2018 Black Panther by Marvel Studio and the 2020 The British Museum by Dan Hicks are two among highly favored productions from that time. When we were globally quarantined, Black Matters Live movement went global and colonizer statues thrown into the river. Popular culture really made the reach into the scope of museum as the authority to promote dominant power, to claim back the power of the marginalized, the colored, the occupied, the oppressed. This is where I will start to show you how the GCC's culture scene is playing the game and they are winning. I think the new Europe will be in the Middle East. A strong vision by Mohammed bin Salman, Saudi Crown Prince, in a panel talk in the Future Investment Initiative Forum, Riyadh, October 24 in 2018. He continued, and the next global renaissance in 30 years will be in the Middle East. Inshallah. God willing, this is Saudi's war, my personal war. Sultan Saud Al-Qassimi, a UAE scholar based in Sharjah, UAE, proposed a key argument in his 2024 essay that the Gulf can replicate the US trajectory from cultural periphery to global center by investing strategically in museums, diverse art collection, and cultural diplomacy. Such transformation would constitute a Gulf cultural century, mirroring America's American century. Dr. Khawla Al-Mari, a Qatar-based Emirati cultural researcher and writer, proposed an argument that in the GCC, museums have transformed from entertainment venues into a learning institution that build cultural literacy and community engagement. They promote cultural diversity through art education, family programs, etc., etc., etc. She further elaborate how GCC museums are tools of cultural diplomacy, part of the Gulf ambition to redefine itself as a global cultural hub. Museum culture art boom in the GCC in the past decade has been something that shows determination of this vision that guided the GCC development. Last week, the International Committee of Museums held the first conference on museums in the Middle East region. While around the same time, the North African part of the Arab world gracefully introduced the Grand Egyptian Museum, something that has been referred to as the Fourth Great Pyramid in Giza. The opening ceremony demonstrates today's implementation of museum diplomacy and cultural authority. As the region is still burning, literally next door of Egypt, on its border, the main message repeatedly throughout the ceremony is the message of peace, 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 by the president, by the performance, by the flying drone slideshow. The ceremony also emphasized the words of the largest museum that was built specifically dedicated for a single civilization, a bit of a dig to museums that still kept stolen artifacts, and also a strong statement of claiming back their culture. The group photo of state leaders, royal members, were part of the major rundown of the ceremony, with interesting placement of the UAE's crown prince right behind the Egyptian president, while the Palestinian queen from Jordan is in the front row next to the Egyptian first lady. Royals from other countries also attended and praised as a pride representative in the global stage. It was a very, very big deal. Well, the public made conscious effort to free that schedule that day, go to the public streaming venues in big cities in Egypt, watch through TikTok or other online platform. The population in my household is 40% Egyptian, so we also made the day special. It was an Egyptian pride. It was a Middle East pride. The opening of GEM was a combination of the high-level museum diplomacy, a real effort to create political relations on the global stage, demonstrating how soft power can be as strong and as resilient as the 1,000-year-old pyramids. But it was also a chance for the general public to enjoy growing a feeling of ownership of their own culture, and maybe a short break from the hell that are streaming daily through our phones. I feel the opening ceremony of GEM is the peak of what I'm trying to say today. Museum, diplomacy, authority. Yeah, okay. The upper level, high elites, do whatever you want. But the public, give us a good show. And that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kaicha, for sharing a very interesting perspective. It's a mixed feeling here between sad and louder as well because of the jokes and everything. But thank you so much for presenting a very interesting paper today. So I hope I still have time for Q&A. Yes, okay. Can I collect maximum 3 questions, 1 or 2 questions? Please don't be too tired to raise questions. Yes, please. Another, maybe another from the participants? Okay, can someone, yes. Can I have the face of the 4th presenter at the screen, because I wanna her to be involved as well in this room. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Mbak, please.
Firstly, thank you for the opportunity. I would like to introduce myself first. My name is Aaron, and thank you for all the great insights from the panel of speakers. I think there was a mention before and from the previous panels about cultural diplomacy only becomes a brand, and a brand. And the problem is, do we still continually do it? Like actually preserving the culture. And since I've done research regarding the Baduy community using their indigenous knowledge as a soft power and nation branding towards sustainability. However, speaking about our country, Indonesia still have this critical gap between using the indigenous community as a nation brand while the indigenous community itself still underrepresented in the country. There was actually one case about one kid from the Baduy community. He was selling honey in Jakarta, and then he got hit by a car, and the hospital cannot handle him because he doesn't have a national identity. And as a result, he was transferred to a couple of hospitals to get handled. So why do we use these indigenous communities as a brand when the country itself haven't treated them fairly? And I think this correlates to the topic of our plenary session today, that is soft power, hard questions. So I'm wondering the perspectives from the speakers today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Another very hard questions from the participants. So I invite all the speakers to share their views on these important questions. Please, anyone want to start? Because it is hard. Or, yeah, please.
Soft power, hard questions, no answers. but just kidding. Well, you really need time to think and contemplate about that. But yeah, of course, we can also share like perspective. One of the points that you said about the underrepresentations of indigenous community in culture, but also it's very difficult. Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, I think the panel, not the panel, the plenary session yesterday mentioned that, who should be speaking? We should not. How do you say that? Who should be speaking, representing the indigenous community, actually, something like that. Maybe I will take the discussions from that point. Because if the indigenous community, it's actually really them who decide about this actually, and I cannot really say a lot of about that, but can I answer in bahasa Indonesia aja maybe here, and you can have to translate maybe. Jadi kalau kita ngomongin tentang representasi, sebenarnya kayak representasi itu bagus atau enggak sih dari sana? Ada kelompok-kelompok yang merasa bahwa representasi itu memang, bagus, karena di sana at least ada suara yang terwakilkan gitu. Tapi at some point, representasi itu juga membuat sebuah overgeneralization gitu. Dan tidak semua pengalaman hidup orang-orang yang ada di komunitas itu tidak terwakili. Jadi itu sebenarnya ada sebuah masalah di representasi gitu. Tapi kadang kita memakai representasi itu kadang juga di dalam branding seperti tadi ya. Gitu ya. Dalam branding memang itu kalau saya bilang menyalahi etika mungkin iya juga, tapi kayak lagi-lagi siapa sih yang bisa ngomong, seharusnya ngomong untuk mereka ya adalah dari komunitasnya gitu. I still need time I think to ponder about this, so I think I'm gonna share the mic with you first.
Please just jump in if you have another views.
Actually, this is not a topic of cultural diplomacy, but I think a key word that has been jumping in my head is internal colonialism. We like to talk about external colonialism, but I think internal colonialism also deserves some attention. And also why branding? I mean, we live in a hyper-capitalist world. Anything that sells will sell. And it's difficult to escape. It's part of reality, but we have to resist it. And just last point, going back to Amilcar Cabral, one of the things he said is that it's in the context of Africa. We like to talk about being African. We're African. We have to kind of preserve our culture. But what did he say after that? But before we are Africans, we have to remember we're humans first. So I think we talk a lot about national identity, but then we forget before national identity, we're humans. So we have to be addressing all these ugly issues first before we can actually really talk about how beautiful cultural diplomacy is.
Yeah, I just want to briefly say you're absolutely right. And it's curious that we sort of had the creation of national identities, sometimes with imperial identities that had assimilationist ideologies, that you eliminated the local cultures because they were somehow seen as sort of inferior or some sort of form of exotic. But now we want to embrace the tokens of those cultures to demonstrate our multiculturalism. But are we actually thinking about how the power structures within our societies are actually giving those people voices? Are we respecting those? And that is the hard question. It's an absolutely accurate question. I think it's a question that I've been thinking about expropriation and tokenism. And so yes, I will just say that.
Yeah, thank you. Kak Ica, do you want to say something on this, please?
That's actually a very interesting question, and I'm really happy it's coming from the younger generation. And Carmina, I think, yeah, correct name. You are really right on the money. Internal colonialism, I mean, Indonesia is the study case that Ben Anderson wrote on his chapter 10, you know. the recipe to build an imagined community is to have a map, to have a census, and to have a museum. So that's why the Indonesian museums are, until sort of today, following this kind of general guideline that doesn't really able to accommodate the whole 400 something sub-ethnic, I could be wrong, okay, maybe 17,000, on those 17 islands, they all have their own local identities. And if the ministry wants to kind of just slowly to kind of create a bridge with this, you know, we have the diversity and unity, maybe they can start repatriate internally, because we do have masterpieces such as the Yupa inscription, which is the oldest inscription ever found in the archipelago, but it's originally from East Borneo. So why not have that, you know, the original form of the objects in West Borneo? And I think there is a session mentioned about how repatriating the objects are also kind of, you know, returning the object, also returning the sense of belonging, the sense of pride and self-respect on the identity. So maybe having the Yupa return to East Kalimantan is not a good idea. It's not a bad idea. Sorry, my government's voice is talking over me. So it could be an interesting idea to kind of start it would be a very long conversation of how we can actually accommodate the whole multicultural that is, you know, it's tremendous. And I'm saying this because based on, let's say the Maori tribe in New Zealand, they are very privileged in terms of the whole state create a bicultural policy for the whole country. So you have the Maori language side by side with the English language. You have the colonial history side by side by the Maori tradition and identity as part of the national identity. Even though they are somewhat more homogeneous, they still have this different opinion on how they define themselves. So it's a much, much bigger challenge for us, Indonesia as a state, to kind of define ourselves in terms of, you know, in the scope of museum. So maybe in this way, internal repatriation can be a good start.
Thank you. I think if we remember from our opening sessions, I think one of the keynote speaker emphasized the importance of community involvement in designing the whole, whatever we define cultural diplomacy. And I think these sessions re-emphasize that thing. You know, internal dynamics could not be really separated from what, in whatever we are trying to project or share, yeah? I want to use the word share rather than project. Share to the external environment, yeah. And thank you for the questions. It's a brave questions. Yes, yes, please. Sure.
Okay, yeah, because I'm actually like finding a word to describe that. It kept me like, so it's actually about exotizations in a way, right? Exotization. Oh yeah, this is indigenous culture that's still like very much pure in our society, and we can use it as a tool for cultural diplomacy. So that's actually one of the things that the colonial power also did with Bali, for example. And until now, like last month we have a discussions. Artists talk with for the exhibition of Beyond Unsettled Past, and they also thought how Bali was like developed into this kind of branding. Bali is a brand, something like that. So yeah, but going to the questions about that again, so it's actually not so much about the representation, but the presentation. So it's actually like, it's up to the community again. Yeah, if we want to like promote something, yeah, promotion is good because there's also like, a way of contact, of understanding between the cultures, between people, right? But it should not happen like in a very top-down approach. Yeah, it's actually like two-way. We should like collaborate. Kita harus kerjasama what to what to show how and also what elements that perhaps the concerns of the community that they want to show to the world. So it's actually not, the government should not become like patronizing in a sense and acting like a sole guardian and the father figure of this community. So that actually like my points.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, the time is up, but I'm very much sure that a lot of notes from all the presenters can be part of our reflections after return to our own home or schools or whatever. And I think it is very, very important to, these sessions provide us with a very important space to rethink about cultural diplomacy. But I hope it is not something that prevent us from keep, trying to redefine, rethink and everything, and then start whatever efforts we can do with collaborations. I think we can close our sessions there. Kak Ica, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us from UAE. Good luck and success to you as well there. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for all the participants for joining our last sessions today. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our speakers and moderator for their insightful session. We invite all of you to stand on the center of the stage for a picture together. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, that has been the plenary session 5, soft power, hard questions, rethinking cultural diplomacy. It is indeed a session that provided us a different perspective from what we have discussed over the past 2 days, and it is indeed something that should definitely spark our inspiration for our upcoming research or just new ways of thinking cultural diplomacy. And with this plenary session, I would have to say that that is the last plenary session for this year's Indonesia International Conference on Cultural Diplomacy. And since day one until today, we have explored different perspectives to view cultural diplomacy as a way to connect among nations, among cultures, within the global dynamics. And we have explored different perspectives, be it from policy perspectives, from grassroots practitioners like diplomats, as well as the more critical approach to seeing cultural diplomacy. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope that that has been a substantial fruit for thinking for your upcoming research and so on. And so I believe that these 2 days of plenary sessions as well as parallel panels have been fruitful and insightful to all of you. As we now reach the conclusion of the Indonesia International Conference on Cultural Diplomacy, I would like to invite once again Bapak Yeremia Alisang PhD, Head of the Undergraduate Program of International Relations at Universitas Indonesia, on behalf of the Steering Committee, to share the findings of the 2-day conference of Iiccd 2025. Mas Yere, please take center stage.
I promise this will be very, very quick, because we already at the end, and a disclaimer, I'm not the head of steering committee. I just, help the Dr. Broto Wardoyo as the head of steering committee. Unfortunately, he cannot be here with us today. So I want to share what we have learned together over these past 2 days at the Indonesia International Conference on Cultural Diplomacy. I think this is a very interesting event because we brought together policymakers, scholars, cultural practitioners, community leaders, and international partners. And the conversation, I believe, were very rich and sometimes challenging, just like the last sessions. And but they pointed towards something important. Cultural diplomacy is changing, and we need to think carefully about where it's headed. Let me walk you through what the steering committee heard from all of you. I think the conference made one thing clear, that culture is not just decorations in diplomacy anymore. It's become essential. Another challenge that we keep hearing about is culture diplomacy only create lasting impact when it has sustained coordinated support. And what is missing is three things came up repeatedly: a shared sense of directions, clear roles of different institutions, and ways to work together instead of silos. So another hashtag here is collaborations. And participants push back against the typical approach to cultural diplomacy. So I think our presentations tell this very clearly, that we want to go beyond the traditional approach of cultural diplomacy. It's something beyond carefully curated performance and iconic symbol. That's not enough anymore. We need to engage with the messy, complex realities of history and culture, the messy complexities of our own domestic environment, and we must deal with that. And we cannot ignore what is happening online. Digital platforms have become where culture really moves now, through social media, collaborative projects, and youth-led communities. Yeah, and I think we also see a lot of younger generation participations in our discussion, and it is very, very much encouraging. And repatriations, we also discussed about repatriations very passionately. It is not only about returning cultural objects to their home communities, but it's also more than that. It's about dignity, about who has the authority of our cultural heritage, about repairing historical wrongs. What is encouraging is seeing how community-led initiatives are working alongside international frameworks to build fairer system. The last major theme was about cooperations, particularly across Asia. We have a long history of cultural exchange in this region. Let's keep doing that with the spirit of, sharing our cultural heritage and collaborate to promote it together. And one more thing we need to talk about is the partnership between stakeholders, including the local community, a beautiful partnership right now between the Ministry of Culture and academia, such as like Universitas Indonesia. And I think this is important to move forward. More and more conference like this is very important to keep the discussions live and open, to engage more stakeholders to really answer and discuss the hard questions. These today show us that cultural diplomacy has real substance. It's grounded in research, rich with ideas, and it matters for how nations relate to each other. Now comes the hard part, turning these insights into actual policies and practices that are coherent, rooted in communities, engaged regionally, and responsible globally. We need to let mutual learning, reciprocity, and solidarity guide us, not just competitive advantage. And on the final note, I want to thank all the student volunteers, the committee who has helped us a lot to arrange this conference, staff from the ministries, our amazing IT, digital supports and everything. Thank you for making everything possible for this 2 days. Please join me, give them a round of applause. Thank you so much. And another thing is, thank you so much for all the participants, fantastic speaker, fascinating presentations. I hope this is not the first and the last of Indonesia International Cultural Diplomacy Conference, but hopefully there will be next events for us to again discuss the hard questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yeremia Lelisang, PhD, on behalf of the steering committee for sharing the key findings in this very important two-day conference. Ladies and gentlemen, to conclude this conference, I would like to invite Ibu Dwi Ardana Riswari Sundrijo to, as the acting dean of Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Indonesia, to deliver her closing remarks to conclude the conference.
Good afternoon, everyone. Things like this makes me hate my job, my work as a vice dean, as an acting dean, because of because I have too many things to do and I cannot really attend the conference. I can only be here like an hour at the beginning, and then an hour in the middle, and now half an hour before closing of the session. And I envy you all. I can see how satisfied you are being part of this conference, from the title, from the questions, from the presentation. I can feel that we are really part of something very important. Now I know I have to deliver my closing speech, but I'm really tempting to talk something about cultural diplomacy. Can I? Do I have time? Yeah. So just allow me just a little bit. I think in this very globalized world, where we are really connected to one another, where there is no border between us. You see, in this conference, we have like 100 of participants, and we have participants from all over the world. Okay, not 200 something states, but all over the world. We have also speakers from all over the world. It shows that border no longer significant for us, right? And with us, with our move in this globalized world, idea, norms, values, anything move so easily. We are connected so easily. So each of us is actually a diplomat. So in this globalized world, I think cultural diplomacy is not an option. It is something that is inevitable. It is something that unavoidable. It is part of our day-to-day activities. It is part of our minute by minute, whatever we speak whatever we speak at the moment. Like, I don't know, when I talk now, if it is a hybrid, then I don't know, whoever can hear me wherever they are. So we are talking about something that is not out of us. We are talking about something that is inside us, part of us now. Yeah, and the main thing is about how we are proud of our own identity, of how we are proud of who we are, our history, and our future. Then we can be the best of diplomat. We can be the best of person who deliver what is culture to us. Okay, back to my text, don't worry. More serious one. On behalf of the Faculty of Political and Social Sciences, so formal, right? Let me sincerely thank you for being part of the Indonesia International Conference on Cultural Diplomacy 2025. Thank you, and thank you. Without all of you being here, we won't be able to discuss all the things that Yere has just conclude so comprehensively and make me so envious for not being here. Over these 2 days, we have gathered more than 100 presenters and participants from Indonesia and colleagues joining us from Italy, Republic of Korea, San Marino, India, and Kenya. Unbelievable. Our speaker lineup was equally international with contribution from Singapore, Portugal, Australia, the United Arab Emirates, Germany, Kenya, and Ukraine. I report this very proudly to our rector. It is too bad you can be here yesterday. This is really an international forum, and you have to be very proud. I told to Pak Rector yesterday. That mix alone already tells a story about how culture and diplomacy now move through many channels, not just formal ones. Move through our mouth, move through our mind, move through our action. No longer we are talking about official channel. Allow me to underline just a few directions that seem especially promising going forward. Again, Yere has mentioned we won't stop here, we will move forward. So what are the opportunities? First, there is clearly room to deepen institutional cooperation between academics, policymakers, and our regional and international partners through joint research, capacity building, and policy work on cultural diplomacy. But the most important thing, through communication, through text, WhatsApp group, TikTok, Instagram, through communications. From small, unofficial, relaxed communication, we go towards a more formal cooperation. Second, this conference has reminded us how important it is to build platforms that connect state and society. Unfortunately, no matter how uncomfortable we are with the role of states, but when we are talking about diplomacy, when we are talking about policy, when we are talking about interrelations, border, we have to include states in our daily. So we are communities, artists, youth, and cultural practitioners. They are already doing in the work on the ground, and university like ours must help with document interpretation and connect all the efforts put forward by those who work so amazingly on the ground. Third, the strong presence of embassies and cultural institutions shows that there is genuine appetite for regional and cross-border collaboration that continue what we started in this room. Yeah, so this is clearly just a beginning, and there are so many opportunities to move forward. And at this moment, allow me with pride to record our gratitude to first the Ministry of Culture and the Republic of Indonesia, in particular the Directorate General of Cultural Diplomacy, Promotion and Cooperation for their trust and partnership, to the members of Scientific Board, Mas Yere, Bu Nurul, who else was here? Bu Asra, Prof Irmawati, thank you so much for making this possible. To our keynote speakers, moderators, panelists, and discussants, to embassies of friendly countries, cultural center, international organization, and finally, I really have to mention this, to all the students, lecturers, staff of Department of International Relations, FISIP UI, who work hardly behind all this preparation. So, big applause to everyone and to IR department. Yeah. So ladies and gentlemen, what we have built over those 2 days is not just a conference. It is the beginning of a network that we hope will last far beyond today, across institutions, disciplines, and borders. Cultural diplomacy thrives when conversation continues, when friendships are maintained, and when good ideas are allowed to grow into real collaboration. Conversation, friendship, good ideas. That's the keywords. Thank you once again for you being here, for your trust to us. and for sharing all your ideas, all your energies, all your enthusiasm. Safe journey back home, everyone. Look forward to see you again next year. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much. Maris, as our acting Dean of Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Indonesia, ladies and gentlemen, we invite all of you now to gather on the center and the front of the floor to take a picture together. So I invite all of you to stand up and perhaps move a little bit to the center of the floor so we can take a group photo together. Once again, I encourage all of you to stand up and perhaps move a little bit to the front and center position of the floor so we can take a nice group picture together commemorating the end of the Indonesia International Conference on Cultural Diplomacy. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to move a bit to the front so we can see your beautiful faces. Let me help. To the people on the right side of the floor, can you guys perhaps move a little bit forward? Boleh maju ke depan sedikit supaya lebih terlihat di gambarnya. Okay, to the gentleman in the back, can we move a little bit forward, please, so that the picture is balanced left and right, because right now we are heavy on the left side. We would love for the pictures to be centered and everyone is visible. Okay, I will help balance out on the right side of the stage. Everyone ready? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Remain. Go back to your seats, if you will. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your participation in this beautiful conference on cultural diplomacy. I would like to again extend our gratitude to the Ministry of Culture of the Republic of Indonesia and the people of the Faculty of Social Political Sciences, Universitas Indonesia, especially the Department of International Relations for making this happen. So all of our speakers, moderators, and presenters, also all of you participants who are actively engaging in this conference. To close, please feel